to do but think about the future, Labour have almost nothing to say about it. No plans for our border, no plans for our energy security, no plans for our economy either, and no principles either. Keir Starmer's gone from embracing Jeremy Corbyn to Natalie Elphicke, all in the cynical pursuit of power at any price. So Labour have no ideas. What they did have, they've U-turned on.
A judge has ruled that parts of the government's Rwanda plan should not be applied in Northern Ireland. The High Court in Belfast determined that aspects of the Illegal Migration Act are incompatible with human rights laws and would breach the Good Friday Agreement. The UK government, though, will have a chance to appeal that ruling before another hearing later this month. Meanwhile, in the US, Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, has taken to the witness stand as the former president's criminal trial continues. He's expected to testify that he helped Mr. Trump illegally hide a so-called hush money payment to the former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Cohen used to be one of the former president's most trusted colleagues, but he's now the prosecution's star witness at the trial in New York as it enters its fifth week. And meanwhile, a new poll is giving Donald Trump a lead in 5 key states. The cost of living and the war in Gaza are said to have driven down support for his rival, President Biden, in key states including Michigan, Nevada and in Pennsylvania. The survey by the New York Times, Siena College and the Philadelphia Inquirer found that the president now leads in just one battleground state, Wisconsin. Here in the UK, a man is facing life in prison for murdering a woman during a series of violent attacks in South London. 38-year-old Mohammed Noor was armed with a makeshift blade when he cut the throat of Jahinta Kosiwa Dogbay in daylight last May. Miss Dogbay had been walking alone in Stockwell Park in Brixton when she was attacked by the man, and she later died at the scene. He has denied 3 other slash attacks 2 days before Miss Dogby's death in similar circumstances. A teacher accused of having sex with teenage boys says she was lonely and craved attention after a breakup, but she has denied the allegations against her. Rebecca Jones said she was struggling during the COVID restrictions and a 9-year relationship breakdown. The 30-year-old was already suspended from her high school job and on bail for alleged sexual activity with a 15-year-old and another 16-year-old teenager. She has pleaded not guilty to 6 charges and her trial at Manchester Crown Court is continuing. In other news, we've heard today that 3 men aged 37, 38 and 63 appearing in court have been accused of assisting the Hong Kong Intelligence Service. It follows an investigation led by officers from the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command, where 11 people were detained. The Met Police said the Hong Kong investigation, though, is not related to a separate case involving Russia. Those 3 men from that group are next due to appear at the Old Bailey later this month. A major parliamentary report on maternity care has found that some pregnant women have been mocked or shouted at and denied basic needs such as pain relief. It also shows mums-to-be are often treated as an inconvenience or risk suffering lifelong injuries as hospitals cover up endemic failures. The Conservative MP who led that birth trauma report has described the quality of care across the country as a postcode lottery. The cross-party report is calling now for a national plan to improve maternity services, led by a new maternity commissioner who would report directly to the Prime Minister. Royal News and the King has officially handed over the role of Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps to the Prince of Wales. In a rare engagement involving both the current monarch and his heir, His Majesty formally handed over the title that he's held for the past 32 years. The King said it was a great joy to meet servicemen during today's visit to Middle Wallop in Hampshire, and Prince William will now represent the Army's Air Wing, which includes the unit that once served in by his brother Prince Harry. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now we start with a stark warning from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, because he said an axis of authoritarian states are trying to undermine the country. And he claims the Conservatives are best placed to deliver a secure future for the UK.
Now, I feel a profound sense of urgency because more will change in the next 5 years than in the last 30. I'm convinced that the next few years will be some of the most dangerous, yet the most transformational that our country has ever known. So the question we face today is this: who has the clear plan and bold ideas to deliver a secure future for you and your family? The dangers that threaten our country are real. They're increasing in number. An axis of authoritarian states like Russia, Iran, North Korea and China is working together to undermine us and our values.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer has been out and about today, and as you'd imagine, he's dismissed Rishi Sunak's claim that the country would be less safe under a Labour government. The Prime Minister said Sir Keir's refusal to adopt the government's plan to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence sent the wrong message.
The first duty of any government, particularly an incoming Labour government, is national security, the security of the country, and that would be my first priority. Now, the Prime Minister today has made a speech. I think it's his 7th reset in 18 months, and I think that really shows you that the choice as we go into this election is now pretty clear.
Again, joined in the studio now by GBNews' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, great to have you back. This all feels a bit 2019 again. It all feels a bit you can't trust Labour with security. Jeremy Corbyn will cancel our nuclear bomb programme. He'll get rid of everything that's going to protect us. It feels a bit Reds under the bed. Is there anything in it, or is this purely the politics of fear?
Well, they're trying to draw a line ahead of the election campaign. I think this, to me, this is, I'm going to call it, the start of a general election campaign has happened today. The long campaign running into, I expect, a November general election was triggered by this speech by Rishi Sunak. It's a wide-ranging speech, over the road from here in Westminster, in Policy Exchange, the centre for new ideas in Tory thinking. Clearly, they think, they looked at the numbers in all the polls they're looking at, and they can see that on defence is an area here where Labour is weak. The Tories have set out how they're going to get to 2.5% of spending of GDP on defence by 2030. Labour say they'll get there when they can afford to, and they see that as a dividing line. They then paint Keir Starmer as someone who supported Jeremy Corbyn twice in 2017, 2019, when Corbyn was known to somebody who wanted to pull out of NATO historically, question marks about nuclear deterrent, question marks about the army. They can say, are you sure that we are going to risk everything with an untried Labour leader like Keir Starmer? The government's been saying for a while now we are in a pre-war period. We heard that speech, didn't we, in Berlin from Jeremy Corbyn, from Rishi Sunak a few weeks ago, making very clear that's the new threat is Russia, this axis of evil, as you describe it, North Korea, Afghanistan, Iran. We need to get ahead of that, and that's what he's saying now. Do
you think this kind of chicken licking, the sky is going to fall in, endlessly repeating we're about to enter World War III, do you think it works or lands with the electorate after a while? And how important... We know defence is a very, very important issue with the electorate, but is this kind of this threat of a Cold War, almost a phony war, is that motivational for the electorate, who seems to care much more about immigration and cost of living?
Yes, and that's why Sunak has been so often in the UK for the past 18 months. He's almost outsourced foreign policy to David Cameron, who's been very effective, I think, very energetic on the world stage, a former Tory Prime Minister. What they're trying to say is you can't trust Keir Starmer to keep you safe. You can't trust him on what he believes in. Why is he accepting Natalie Elphicke, quite a right-wing Tory MP, as a Labour MP? He's gone from embracing Jeremy Corbyn to Natalie Elphicke, Mrs Sunak said earlier. So clearly they're trying to challenge the person. Are you sure about who you're getting as Prime Minister? For his part, though, Keir Starmer is saying, don't worry about that. You know, I will keep this country safe. And we asked him, didn't we, for GBNews in Estonia, would you fire a nuclear weapon to keep us safe? He said, well, clearly he hinted he would.
OK, thank you very much, Chris Hope. Stick with us, but for now, I'm joined by GBNews' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, welcome to the show. So, Chris Hope's very clear. This is all about first shots fired in the general election campaign on the topic of defence. Is this going to work with the electorate? This almost Corbynista feeling of you can't trust Britain's safety under the Labour Party, or do you think it's a bit of a cheap shot?
Well, I think that what Rishi Sunak came up with today was a bit of a word salad, stating the obvious, that there's a lot of big bad wolves out there, and he's the woodcutter who's coming to save us. When it comes to Labour's defence policy, I mean, what Keir Starmer has said is there would be a strategic defence review once Labour are in power, which seems to be the right way forward. I mean, Rishi Sunak was absolutely right. The threats against us are changing. The questions come down to actually how we combat it. Do we need to change the way we defend ourselves? Not just a matter of money, but something like Trident, for instance. That's been our traditional defence. We've got 4 submarines out there. They have the firepower of 8 Hiroshimas each. Is that the best way forward, or do we need more conventional forces to deal with a threat from Russia and China?
And also, Nigel, to use another military metaphor, is this a bit of a smokescreen? I mean, we've got the smallest army since the Napoleonic times, the smallest RAF since World War I. So few sailors were decommissioning ships, and an entire military establishment that seems more interested in pronouns.
Well, that's absolutely the question, really. And this is what I mean about whether or not we need to beef up our conventional forces. But there isn't the money to do everything. That Trident costs, the overall programme will cost around £200 billion. Do you, for instance, reduce the number of boats from 4 to 3, say? Could we get away with that and use that money to beef up the army so we don't have the smallest force since Napoleonic times?
Don't you think, actually, people are more concerned about the defence of the realm, defending our own coast from small boats and dinghies? This kind of extrapolation onto a broader threat, as important, obviously, as it is, does it feel like a bit of an electoral distraction?
Well, I think you're going to hear more of that as the election campaign goes on. And I think that, as Chris has just said, what we've seen today is the opening shots. What is going to be a very, very long campaign, which we're just going to have to get used to. And yes, immigration is going to be a major part of it. Now, it'll be up to the voters to decide which they think is most important.
Certainly is. OK, Nigel Nelson, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. Now, I'll have lots more on what Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer had to say throughout the rest of the show, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, onwards to a story that broke at lunchtime as a huge blow to the government's Rwanda plan, because a judge has ruled that provisions of the UK's Illegal Migration Act should be disapplied in Northern Ireland. Mr Justice Humphreys says they undermine human rights protections guaranteed in the region under post-Brexit arrangements. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by our political correspondent, Olivia Udley. Olivia, welcome to the show. Doesn't this just say something fundamental? And that is, all along, those who said we were still tied to Strasbourg under the Brexit withdrawal agreement, under the Windsor knot, which became, the Windsor agreement became more of a Windsor knot, which actually is now feeling like a Windsor noose. And here they are cherry-picking pieces of legislation saying, oh, no, this doesn't apply to us. We'd rather answer to the ECHR.
Well, I think lots of Brexiteers would agree with you, Martin. Basically, what this judgment says is that ECHR legislation is supreme in Northern Ireland. Now, that is because the Windsor Agreement essentially underpins the Good Friday Agreement, and the Good Friday Agreement has the ECHR legislation woven into the very threads of it. Basically, all rights enshrined in ECHR law are also enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement and are also enshrined in the Windsor Agreement. As you say, that is a big problem for Rishi Sunak. The whole point of his Illegal Immigration Act, that final bit of the Rwanda bill, which he managed to get through a few weeks ago, is that it would circumnavigate EU law. And what this judgment says is, well, in Northern Ireland, it's not allowed to circumnavigate EU law. EU law in Northern Ireland is supreme. This causes 2 big problems for the Prime Minister. The first is, of course, that it completely undermines the Rwanda legislation. We could easily see a huge surge of migrants coming in to Northern Ireland, and there they would be treated completely differently to if they came to the UK. Rishi Sunak will be hoping that that won't happen, mainly because of geography. It would be quite difficult for migrants to get to Northern Ireland without coming through Britain. But, of course, we will get issues with migrants outstaying visas, etc., done in Northern Ireland. The other problem, which I think is going to become a real headache for Rishi Sunak, is this just pulls open the wound of the Windsor Agreement, which Rishi Sunak thought he'd settled. That is really the one big achievement that Sunak can point to in his time as Prime Minister, that he's managed to get the Brexit issue closed. Well, it turns out that he hasn't. Already, unionists in Northern Ireland are expressing their absolute fury that now what's going to happen is the law will be applied differently in Northern Ireland to in the rest of the UK. And for quite a big aspect, immigration is a huge, huge issue. And immigration law in Northern Ireland will now differ to mainland Great Britain. That is a massive problem for Rishi Sunak. He is going to have the DUP on his heels. He's going to have all sorts of Northern Irish unionists on his heels. And all of those issues which he thought he'd sewn up with the Windsor Agreement have just been ripped open again.
Olivia, brilliantly put. And another thing that's going to be angry about this is the Northern Irish electorate, because now they have the same status as the entire island of Ireland. It means that we cannot deport people from Northern Ireland to Rwanda. And I wonder what the electorate are going to think about that. We've seen how it's landed in the Southern Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, and I think this is going to be a huge headache for the Prime Minister, Olivia Utley, and of course, Chris Oak. Thank you very much. A cracking start to the show. Now, there's still plenty of time to win our biggest cash prize so far, a whopping £20,000, tax-free. Imagine having that in your bank account this summer. Well, you've got to be in it to win it, and here's your chance to bag the lot.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, Prince Harry's old army regiment has a new Colonel-in-Chief, and it's his brother. Talk about slap in the face for the Ginger Prince. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the Green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach. We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:23. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll be joined by England cricket legend David Gower, who will give his reaction to the news that the great James Anderson will retire this summer. Fantastic. Can't wait. Now to a confirmation of a real slap in the face for Prince Harry, because his brother, the Prince of Wales, has become today the Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps, which is Harry's old regiment, of course. And the King had the role for 31 years prior to this, but he handed it over to Prince William at the Army Aviation Centre this lunchtime. Well, let's cross down, speak to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's in the fantastically named Middle Wallop in Hampshire. So, Cameron, talk about a wallop. What a wallop in the face this is for Prince Harry.
Yeah, perhaps a little bit, Martin, and just to add insult to injury, maybe, the location of this joint engagement between the King and the Prince of Wales was the exact base that Prince Harry trained to fly in an Apache helicopter and be a gunner before he went to Afghanistan for his second tour, which ended in 2013. This was a joint engagement between the King and the Prince of Wales. It was announced by Buckingham Palace back in August, actually, that the King would be handing over the responsibility of Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps to Prince William. That happened back in August, but the engagement itself happened today. So we had the King meeting veterans and families inside the museum attached to the army base here. Prince William was briefed on the operational activities that that particular regiment is taking part with at the moment, and then they both joined in front of an Apache helicopter and many media representatives to do the official handover. The King handed over his cap and badge to the Prince of Wales, and he became Colonel-in-Chief of that regiment. Now, I spoke to Captain Johnny Riley, who met the King and the Prince of Wales this afternoon, and this is what he said about Prince William's new responsibilities.
Pretty ceremonial, as you can expect, but more of that support at the top of the head there. So for every Army Air Corps soldier to know that they have the Prince of Wales as their Colonel-in-Chief, that's a real privilege for us all. I think he probably felt quite proud, actually. I know it's been something close to his heart, that affiliation with the Army Air Corps and being a military aviator. So to be able to hand that over personally to his son, it seemed like it was a very poignant event.
Now, as we were saying, Prince Harry was part of the Army Air Corps during the second tour of Afghanistan. He was an Apache gunner, the Apache helicopter Prince William flying in this afternoon. But even if Prince Harry hadn't stood back as a working member of the royal family, I think it's unlikely he would have been given the role of Colonel-in-Chief by His Majesty the King. The reason being, the King held that role as Prince of Wales, as heir to the throne, for 31 years. So perhaps Buckingham Palace saw fit that it should only hand over to the next Prince of Wales, Prince William, for him being heir to the throne.
Okay, Cameron Walker, thank you for that update from Middle Wallop. And joining me now is the royal expert and the journalist Pandora Forsyth. Pandora, welcome to the show. There's no getting away from it. Middle Wallop has delivered a massive wallop in the face for Prince Harry today. Yet more proof he is becoming very much the prodigal son, the one who's been cast into the wilderness.
Yeah, it's just the reality of it. And Prince Harry knew this when he left as senior member of the working family, that he would have to give up his honorary military title. So even though this wasn't his title, lots of people for many years thought, well, it would make sense for him to have the title. So unfortunately, this is just now the reality for Harry. And it's brutal. And of course, it's going to hit home because it's very personal for him. And I'm sure that's not lost on the King or his brother William, but it's just the fact of reality. And to be quite frank with you, it's not like William has gone in there and gone in there without, due service. He's also had military background. He also has military experience as well with helicopters. So, he is the right fit for the role. But for Harry, of course, this will most definitely hurt.
But, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Pandora. This is a case of making your bed and lying in it. When you stand down from raw duties and those military roles that come with that, they fall by the wayside. This is the destiny that you chose, and he chose a destiny which involved Netflix and Nigeria, not one of duty. So, you make your bed and you lie in it, right?
Yeah, and also, to be fair to Harry, he is in Nigeria and he's also speaking to military veterans there. He just won't get the royal stamp of approval and, of course, this title. And William and his father are speaking to UK military veterans, whereas across the pond, with his tie to Invictus Games, he'll be speaking to military veterans in Nigeria. So he is still going to carry on noting all of his honourable military work, because quite frankly it is, despite what many people's opinions might be about Harry. He has served in the military and he has served for our country, but so has William. And William is a working member of the royal family. And if anybody was going to fit this role, now that Harry's not part of the royal family working side of it, then it would be William. And William does deserve this.
And Pandora, there's a chance this afternoon that Spare, Prince Harry's memoir, might be crowned the book of the year. Do you think, looking at those scenes from Nigeria, that Prince Harry really was the spare part on this tour? It felt like the Meghan tour of Nigeria to me.
I personally think they've been looking like they've been getting along very well. For lots of people, they think that this non-royal tour has been getting as much media coverage as a royal tour would. Perhaps it's not getting as many positive headlines that they'd like. Lots of speculation about, well, perhaps this is a missed opportunity for the royal family, and isn't it a shame? But they're still getting worldwide coverage. We're still speaking about it now. So if that was their aim, to get Invictus Games into the headlines, well, they're doing quite well, aren't they, really?
Very tactfully put. Superb. Thanks for joining us, Pandora Forsyth. Have a fantastic afternoon. Thanks for your time. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and we'll discuss the report that's found obese people can be twice as likely to take sick days off. It's now even harming the economy. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. It is exactly 3:30. A look at the headlines this hour. Rishi Sunak has warned that giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would, he said, leave the country less safe. Setting out his pre-election pitch to voters, the Prime Minister said that protecting people during the dangerous but transformational times ahead is something only the Conservatives can do. A judge has ruled that parts of the government's Rwanda plan should not be applied in Northern Ireland. The High Court in Belfast determined that aspects of the Illegal Migration Act are incompatible with human rights laws and would breach the Good Friday Agreement. The UK government, though, will have the chance to appeal before another hearing later this month. In the US, Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, has taken to the witness stand at his criminal trial. He's expected to testify that he helped Mr. Trump illegally hide a so-called hush money payment to the former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Cohen used to be one of the former president's most trusted colleagues, but he's now the prosecution's star witness as the trial in New York enters its 5th week. And a man is facing life in prison for murdering a woman during a series of violent attacks in South London. 34-year-old Mohammed Noor was armed with a makeshift blade when he attacked Yohanita Kosi-Dogba in broad daylight last May. He admitted her murder and to having a blade made from scissors, but has denied carrying out similar attacks in the days before her death. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. Tamsin Roberts will have your next update at 4 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Next, a look at the markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2557 and €1.1627. The price of gold this afternoon is £1,866 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,422 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Now, absolutely shed loads of you have been getting in touch and sending me messages, and the thing that's really got you going is the recording of crime data by nationality. Please send your messages in, and there's a new way of getting in touch with us. And here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. We're seeing the usual queues in the West Midlands on the M5 northbound to join the M6 at Junction 8. Estimated travel time around 20 minutes. If you're travelling on the M4 in South Wales, away from Junction 24 of the M4, the Caldra, the A48 westbound in towards Newport has been closed for an accident. It's between Junction 24, the Caldra and Cot Hill. Long delays in Kent on the M25 Dartford Tunnel anti-clockwise. That's following an earlier accident at Junction 1A Dartford. All lanes have reopened, but there is still residual congestion. And we've also got queues on the M25 clockwise, this time in Hertfordshire. That's between Junction 22 for London Colney and 23 for South Mim. That's down to roadworks. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, you know, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:37. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, later in the show, I get reaction to news that Russian agents could be spying on British soldiers' mobile phones. But before that, to a study that's found obese people are up to twice as likely to take time off work through sickness, and it's now damaging the British economy. Analysis of data from millions of workers across all of Europe found that people take more sick days the heavier they are because of complications such as joint pain, diabetes, depression and even heart disease. Well, I'm joined now by Tam Fry, who's the chairman of the National Obesity Forum. Welcome to the show, Tam. A very sobering set of figures, and a set of figures that cannot be ignored because they are many, many millions across many, many nations. And the really eye-watering thing here, 2.5 times more likely to have had at least 1 week off with poor health in the past year. And Tam, Britain is amongst the worst offenders of 28 countries examined. What on earth is going on here?
Well, what's going on is that people are suffering now, and the country is suffering now, because the government from 20 years ago has not been sufficiently switched on to understand that if you have obesity, it's not just the medical conditions which you will suffer from, like diabetes and cardiovascular disease and things like that, but also mobility. And if you are unable to move and you can't get to your place of work, you will have to take sick leave and not a go. Now, work from home might just sort some of that out, but in general, I'm afraid that we have, or the government has been woeful in not understanding that, in fact, obesity has many, many, many different facets to it. And this unemployment figure is just one.
That's right, Tam, and it says here it provides the strongest evidence so far that soaring obesity is actually underpinning the UK's record sickness levels, with 2.8 million people now signed off work. If obesity is making us literally the sick man of Europe, literally making us unable to economically compete, then what do we do about it? We've got to step up and do something more drastic, haven't we?
Yes, we have to be much more drastic. I mean, I've had conversations over the last 2 days, because I've had a preview of this paper from Venice, that we may have to start to do the things which people say would never happen in this country. I mean, I'm a great fan of what the Japanese did. The Japanese saw obesity looming over the horizon, understood precisely what it would mean in the long term to the Japanese economy, and then set down a law called the metabolic law, the Metapo law. And it said that everybody in Japan would be assessed for their obesity or for their weight every year. And the way it worked was to say to the employers, we're going to put you in charge of keeping your workforce in shape. And you're going to measure their waist circumference every year. And if it doesn't come within a kind of a parameter, we're going to fine you. And you bet the employers didn't want to be fined, so they made absolute provision that everybody in their shop actually did exercises and physical activity. We in this country used to laugh at that. We all thought, how quaint that these funny people over in the Far East were doing this kind of thing. We should never do it. But in fact, it should be done. There should be annual checks in the estimation of the forum to make sure that people are fit and in shape, and that means not only to avoid medical conditions, but to avoid sick leave and things like that, which will ultimately cost the country dear.
Tam, the problem with that approach, of course, is that it's way too common sense. It will never catch on, and also it will be fat shaming. It would be a hate crime to start measuring people's waist sizes in the United Kingdom because we've gone so far down the route of protecting individuals' rights. We have no autonomy or control anymore. And for that reason, are we at the mercy of this? It's like we're stuck in a rut.
There will be a huge amount of pushback. But let me take you back to the seatbelts. When we had seatbelts identified in this country, everybody said we can't have seatbelts because it's an affront, that's nanny statism, whatever. And a lot of people refused to use them. But then it became quite clear that if you didn't wear a seatbelt, you were going to be penalized in some way. And would you believe now, nobody gets into a car and doesn't strap up. It is accepted as being a norm. Now, it might take 1 or 2 years to get this through, but it's something which has to be attempted, because if you don't do this kind of thing and you are not firm, and I don't use the word nanny state, but if you are not firm in your advice of what might be around the corner if you don't do this or you don't do that, then you will suffer the consequences. And this particular figure from Venice today shows the consequences which we have to put up with.
And Tam, do you think if we don't take action, something else could happen? And that is, if you're the owner of a small or medium-sized enterprise and you see figures like this, you might start thinking to yourself, well, I'm not going to take the risk of hiring somebody who's overweight or obese or severely obese. They might not say it because that would be illegal under Discrimination Acts, but they might stop hiring overweight people with the very real fear that they might be less productive and have more time off sick. So if we don't take action, it might start getting kind of in by the back door anyway.
Well, the same applied in Japan. I mean, everything started from where they were at the moment. They were worried about people putting on weight. Therefore, there were people who were putting on weight, and they said, fine, we're going to stop it. Now, within the legislation, I'm not familiar with the Japanese legislation, but within the legislation, there must have been a cooling off period, if you will, whereby it was acceptable that it was going to take a year or two for this kind of thing to take place. But it did. And now you have to believe that Japan, with an obesity rate of 6%, as opposed to the 26% in this country, they got it. And that is something which we have to decide to do in this country. It really should start in school. And in school, there should be much more provision for allowing pupils to understand what the effects of too much weight will do, and that it'll cut them in their pockets if they don't do it. And if you learn that kind of thing at school, it's part of life and it continues on and into your working life. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's something drastic has got to happen. We've allowed people to become, if you will, fat on their own account for too long, and now the state has got to do something which will turn that around. Otherwise, we will have an economic disaster.
OK, pardon the pun, but that's fantastic food for thought. Tam Fry, who's the chairman of the National Obesity Forum. Thanks for joining me on the show. Excellent stuff. Now, 40 Tory MPs are backing a call to publish league tables of the migrant nationalities who have committed the most serious crimes. Apparently, civil servants are dead against the plan. Well, of course they are, but should they be brought in? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, time for the latest forecast with the Met Office for GB News. Warm and bright once again in the east today, but cloudier and cooler elsewhere with outbreaks of rain moving steadily in from the west to the east because of this area of low pressure which has displaced the high that brought us so much fine weather over the last week or so. That fine weather persists just about into the evening for eastern England, northeast Scotland. It's cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain that have been persisting in the west through the day. They will move their way eastwards as the night progresses. The rain becomes a bit more fragmented, so it's on and off rain across western Scotland, northern and central England. Some clear spells towards the west and a chilly feel here first thing, single figures, but for many others it's 12 to 15 Celsius as we begin the day on Tuesday, and frequent showers appearing into the southwest and South Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Some of these could be quite heavy and slow moving. They will be accompanied by thunder in the far southwest, but some brightness in between, so feeling a bit more pleasant perhaps compared with Monday's weather. In the east, though, a real change of weather compared with the last few days. Cloudy, Outbreaks of rain and a lot of low cloud. We've still got that low cloud on Wednesday morning across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland. Brighter skies towards the west, but again, a day of sunny spells and showers. And really, sunny spells and showers, the theme on Thursday and Friday as well.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News, weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:49. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, at 4 o'clock, we'll hear from Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. We don't know when we're going to go to the polls, but the two main parties are already on an election war footing. Before that, 40 Tory MPs are backing a call to publish league tables showing the migrant nationalities with the highest rates of crime. Under the plan, the nationality, visa status and the asylum status of every offender convicted in English and Welsh courts would be revealed each and every year. Now, a similar scheme is in operation in Denmark, where people from Kuwait are almost 9 times more likely to commit violent crime compared to native Danes. Well, to discuss this further, I'm now joined by the former Metropolitan Police Senior Investigating Officer, Peter Kirkham. Peter, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So, as a serving police officer out there on the beat, would it be useful to you to know the nationalities most likely to commit violent crimes? The figures are stark. The Danish figures showed us the Kuwaitis are 9 times more likely, Tunisians almost 8 3/4 times more likely, and the top 9 countries for committing violent crimes over a 24-year period in Denmark are all from the Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan or Turkish countries. Would that data be useful to you as a serving beat copper or an operational director?
I don't think it would. When it comes to patrol, when it comes to policing communities, you deal with what's in front of you based on the descriptions that you've got. It would be useful, perhaps, when it comes to criminal intelligence, and to a certain extent, that sort of data is already gathered by the police and used in intelligence assessments. But in relation to beat and patrol officers, probably not.
Would it not be useful, for example, if there are areas of cities which we know happens where there are big clusters, big concentrations of certain communities, it would allow you to understand with a more broad representation of where the likelihood not only of crimes occurring are, but of keeping other people in those areas from non-immigrant communities safer? Surely it'd just be a pure asset.
Perhaps in some cases. but I don't think it would be any significant number of instances. What you've got to remember is the number of non-offenders in every community of every nationality is far greater than the number of offenders. And so you couldn't stereotype everybody from Kuwait, was mentioned in relation to Denmark, everyone from Kuwait as being a potential violent criminal, and therefore subject them to the use of police powers, stop and search or arrest or whatever it might be.
But Peter, we hear from
on an individual basis.
But Peter, I speak to police officers all the time who know that certain communities have a certain overrepresentation, for example, of violent knife crime, say, for example, in London. And I know police officers shy away from offender profiling or whatever it's called to use that data, but it is surely a useful tool. And it's not stereotyping or generalising, it's just data. For example, 14% of the population in Denmark are immigrants and their descendants, but they commit 29% of violent crime, 2.5 times more likely to do so. Surely that's a useful thing to know.
Well, it's not really, because you can't use that data in an individual case without stereotyping somebody. And the vast majority of people of any nationality aren't offenders. And so that would be entirely inappropriate to do. There's also issues around the collection of the data. We know that Home Office statistics around immigration are dire, to say the least. We don't even know how many people are in the country. We don't have any ID card system. So where this data is going to come from and how reliable it's going to be is another matter entirely.
But we already have the data. We already have that data, Peter. But we have the data of people's ethnicity on arrest. We already have that. But there's a reluctance to publish it or use it because, as you say, we're fearful of stereotypes. How about protecting the public?
But it's already gathered within the police service. Why does it need to be made public? I just see that there's going to be a downside of the misuse of this data by those with perhaps racist or similar axe to grind on social media who will misuse it. And that will create problems in relation to hate crime, in relation to attacks on those communities. And so I don't think the publication bit is needed. If they gather it, great. It will be part of criminal intelligence, the same as the current data is.
OK, Peter Kirk, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Thanks for your time. Always a delight. So stick with us. After this, we're talking about Rishi Sunak has warned of an axis of authoritarian states that are trying to undermine the country. But is that true, or is it the politics of fear? Stick with me. I'm Martin Daubney. First, it's your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, time for the latest forecast with the Met Office for GB News. Warm and bright once again in the east today, but cloudier and cooler elsewhere with outbreaks of rain moving steadily in from the west to the east because of this area of low pressure which has displaced the high that brought us so much fine weather over the last week or so. That fine weather persists just about into the evening for eastern England, northeast Scotland. It's cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain that have been persisting in the west through the day. They will move their way eastwards as the night progresses. The rain becomes a bit more fragmented, so it's on and off rain across western Scotland, northern and central England. Some clear spells towards the west and a chilly feel here first thing, single figures, but for many others it's 12 to 15 Celsius as we begin the day on Tuesday, and frequent showers appearing into the southwest and South Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Some of these could be quite heavy and slow moving. They will be accompanied by thunder in the far southwest, but some brightness in between, so feeling a bit more pleasant perhaps compared with Monday's weather. In the east, though, a real change of weather compared with the last few days. Cloudy, outbreaks of rain and a lot of low cloud. We've still got that low cloud on Wednesday morning across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland. Brighter skies towards the west, but again, a day of sunny spells and showers. And really, sunny spells and showers the theme on Thursday and Friday as well.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
the latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M56 westbound in Manchester. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle causing queues. That's if you're travelling between Junction 6, the Hale Four Seasons roundabout, towards Junction 7 for Bowden. The usual queues on the M5 northbound if you're heading towards the M6 at Junction 8. Estimated travel time there around 15 minutes. Queuing traffic for the M25 Dartford Tunnel anti-clockwise just at Junction 1A for Dartford. Queues going back towards Junction 2, the Darrenth interchange. Also in Kent, it's slow on the M2 exit slip road coastbound at Junction 3, that's the Taddington roundabout. We're seeing slow traffic in the roadworks on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire between Junction 22 London Coney and 23 South Mims, and it's also slow M25 into the roadworks at the Wisley interchange. And that's the latest traffic and travel.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing. Just go for it. It's an absolute must. You must try and go for it.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. I hope you're having a very happy Monday. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, Rishi Sunak says the UK faces an axis of evil from authoritarian states such as China, Russia, North Korea and Iran. The Prime Minister claims we are moving into the most dangerous years our country has ever known. But is this true, or is it merely the politics of fear? Next up, the Rwanda bill has been given yet another huge blow as a judge, this time in Northern Ireland, has disapplied it there, meaning that asylum seekers cannot be deported from Northern Ireland. Does this prove that we never got sovereignty with Brexit and that once again the European Court of Human Rights still rules the roost? And a landmark report into birth trauma claims that new mothers risk suffering lifelong injuries as hospitals cover up endemic failures in Britain's maternity system. We'll be joined by Labour MP Rosie Duffield to discuss this massively important topic. And a group of 40 MPs is calling for crime data to be recorded showing the nationalities of offenders. A similar move in Denmark showed immigrants were 2.5 times more likely to commit violent crimes, with some nationalities being 9 times more likely to offend. But as you'd imagine, civil service are dead against the move, but should we go ahead with it anyway? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. We've got a huge amount to get through, but those two big stories that leap out to me. The recording of the nationality of violent offenders. It started in Denmark around about 2011, and the data is irrefutable. The most violent crime in Denmark are committed by those from a few countries, the Middle Eastern, North African, Pakistan and Turkey. The data is the data. The data isn't racist. Surely it'd be useful to know if the same applies here. What do you think? You've already been in touch in your hundreds on that one. And secondly, Northern Ireland, once again, now saying that they will not deport people from there to Rwanda. Surely this proves that we aren't a United Kingdom, but they want to cherry-pick which pieces of legislation they use, and now they seem to be at the mercy of the European Court of Human Rights and not listening to Westminster. Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But it's your headlines now, and it's Tamsin Roberts.
Martin, thanks very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 4:02. Rishi Sunak has warned that giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would leave the country less safe. Setting out his pre-election pitch to voters, the Prime Minister said protecting people during what he called the dangerous but transformational times ahead is something only the Conservatives can do.
Despite having 14 years with nothing to do but think about the future, Labour have almost nothing to say about it. No plans for our border. No plans for our energy security, no plans for our economy either. And no principles either. Keir Starmer's gone from embracing Jeremy Corbyn to Natalie Elphicke, all in the cynical pursuit of power at any price. So Labour have no ideas. What they did have, they've U-turned on.
A judge has ruled that parts of the government's Rwanda plan should not be applied in Northern Ireland. The High Court in Belfast determined that aspects of the Illegal Migration Act are incompatible with human rights laws and would breach the Good Friday Agreement. The UK government will have the chance to appeal before another hearing later this month. In the US, Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, has taken the witness stand at his criminal trial. He's expected to testify that he helped Mr. Trump illegally hide a so-called hush money payment to the former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Cohen used to be one of the former president's most trusted colleagues, but he's now the prosecution's star witness as the trial in New York enters its 5th week. And a new poll is giving Donald Trump a lead in 5 key states. The cost of living and the war in Gaza are said to have driven down support for President Biden in key states, including Michigan, Nevada and Pennsylvania. The survey by the New York Times, Siena College and the Philadelphia Inquirer found the president now leads in just one battleground state, Wisconsin. A teacher accused of having intimate relationships with teenage boys says she's craved attention after a breakup, but denies allegations against her. Rebecca Jones says she struggled following the breakdown of a 9-year relationship and during the COVID lockdowns. The 30-year-old was already suspended from her high school job and on bail following alleged intimate contact with 2 teenage boys. She pleaded not guilty to 6 charges. Her trial at Manchester Crown Court is continuing. A man is facing life in prison for murdering a woman during a series of violent attacks in South London. 34-year-old Mohamed Noor was armed with a makeshift blade when he attacked Yohanita Kosiwandogbe in broad daylight last May. He admitted to her murder and having a blade made from scissors, but denied carrying out similar attacks in the days before her death. 3 men have appeared in court accused of assisting the Hong Kong Intelligence Service. It follows an investigation led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command, where 11 people were detained. The men, aged 37, 38 and 63, will appear at the Old Bailey on the 24th of May. A major parliamentary report on maternity care has found that some pregnant women have been mocked or shouted at and denied basic needs such as pain relief. It also shows mums-to-be are often treated as an inconvenience and risk suffering lifelong injuries as hospitals cover up endemic failures. A Conservative MP who led the birth trauma report described the quality of maternity services as a postcode lottery. The cross-party report is calling for a national plan to improve services, led by a new maternity commissioner who would report directly to the Prime Minister. The King has officially handed over the role of Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps to the Prince of Wales. In a rare engagement involving both the current monarch and his heir, His Majesty formally handed over the title he's held for the past 32 years. The King said it was a great joy to meet servicemen during today's visit to Middle Wallop in Hampshire. Prince William will now represent the Army's Air Wing, which includes the unit once served by his brother. Well, for the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's over to Martin.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now let's get cracking on this hour, and we start with a warning from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, because he said that an axis of authoritarian states are trying to undermine the country. And he claims Conservatives are best placed to deliver a more secure future for the UK.
Now, I feel a profound sense of urgency because more will change in the next 5 years than in the last 30. I'm convinced that the next few years will be some of the most dangerous, yet the most transformational that our country has ever known. So the question we face today is this: who has the clear plan and bold ideas to deliver a secure future for you and your family? The dangers that threaten our country are real. They're increasing in number. An axis of authoritarian states like Russia, Iran, North Korea and China is working together to undermine us and our values.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer has also been out and about today, and as you'd imagine, he's dismissed Rishi Sunak's claim that the country would be less safe under a Labour government. The Prime Minister said Sir Keir's refusal to adopt the government's plan to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence sent the wrong message.
The first duty of any government, particularly an incoming Labour government, is national security, the security of the country, and that would be my first priority. Now, the Prime Minister today has made a speech. I think it's his 7th reset in 18 months. And I think that really shows you that the choice as we go into this election is now pretty clear.
It's working. OK, I'm joined in the studio now by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, how much of a real threat do you think this is? I mean, we're told almost every week that World War III is just about to start. Is this a phony war being cooked up by the Prime Minister to try and get us all scared? Is this the politics of fear?
Certainly fear is part of that, Martin. I think what you're seeing here is a drumbeat of concern about the international world stage. Russia, Ukraine, of course, Iran, North Korea, China. We know these are hostile actors in many ways towards the UK's interests. So we're hearing from Grant Shapps, Defence Secretary, saying we're in a pre-war state. Last week, David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, saying we need to get 2.5% of GDP spent on defence. This country's target is to get there by 2030. Under the Tories, Labour want to get their way when they can afford to. I think what you're seeing now from that clip with Sir Keir Starmer is he's being forced to talk about what he would do to keep the country safe, and that's the purpose of this intervention today by Rishi Sunak, to try and raise question marks about whether can you trust him to make the right choices when required. We've asked him for GB News in Estonia last year. He said, we asked, would you push the nuclear button to keep the country safe? And he said, well, you know, I'm not going to say when I'll push it, but I will do what is necessary. And that's all he can say. But he's pushed him to a position he didn't want to be on a Monday morning.
And isn't that the point? This might have landed much better during the Corbyn years. We saw then, you can't trust Corbyn with the nuclear codes. He's literally a red under the bed. We'd be surrendering before we even started. Jeremy Corbyn, of course, was very widely disliked by the army and the veteran, the forces community. And I guess, is the attack line that Starmer stood by him then, and therefore he can't be trusted today?
Twice through 2 elections, 2017, 2019. In fact, Natalie Elphicke, the big story is still in Westminster, is this defection by Natalie Elphicke, the Tory MP for Dover, to be a Labour MP. That is what's dominating conversation over in Parliament, where I've been this lunchtime. He said, Sunak said, you can't trust what this guy says. Look at what he did with Natalie Elphicke. How can Natalie Elphicke now be a Labour MP when she's quite to the right of the Tory party, and that's the point. You can't trust what Starmer's saying. For Starmer's point of view, Keir Starmer, he's meeting with new city mayors up in the West Midlands. He's making very clear that they see it as a desperate attempt to try and reshape the narrative, seventh attempt to relaunch this failing premiership.
OK, stick around, Chris. I want to get your reaction too on this next story. We'll have lots more on what Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer had to say throughout the show, and there's plenty of coverage, of course, on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Now to our next story, one that broke today at lunchtime, and it's a blow to the government's Rwanda plan, a massive blow, because a judge has ruled that provisions of the UK's Illegal Migration Act should be disapplied in Northern Ireland. Mr Justice Humphreys says they undermine human rights protections guaranteed in the region under post-Brexit arrangements. Well, I'm also joined in our studio by GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, a lot of people will be looking at this and scratching their heads and thinking, hang on a minute, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. Brexit rules were meant to apply to all of the UK. How can this fella, Justice Humphreys, whoever he is, choose that suddenly Northern Ireland isn't a part of that, and actually people can't be deported to Rwanda from Northern Ireland?
Well, this could potentially be a huge problem for Rishi Sunak. What this judge in Northern Ireland, Mr Justice Humphreys, has ruled is that the Rwanda bill, as it stands, can be disapplied in Northern Ireland. Now, why is that? Well, essentially, the Rwanda bill, in the form that Rishi Sunak finally got it through Parliament, is a way for the government to circumnavigate ECHR legislation. It basically says that Parliament in the UK is sovereign over EU rulings. In Northern Ireland, this judge is saying that can't be the case because ECHR rulings, European law, is embedded in the Good Friday Agreement, and the withdrawal agreement, the Windsor Framework, which finally was supposed to be the end game for Brexit, enshrines the Good Friday Agreement in British law. So basically, long story, but what this judge seems to be saying is that in Northern Ireland, EU law is supreme over UK law. Now, that obviously could cause huge practical and sort of existential problems for Rishi Sunak. On a practical level, this could be a big issue insofar as migrants could come over to Belfast or come to the UK, come to mainland Great Britain, and then fly over to Belfast as a way of getting around that Rwanda legislation. And then, of course, there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Britain. You don't even need a passport to fly from Northern Ireland to Britain. And so you could have all sorts of people flying over to Belfast to get away from the Rwanda legislation and then flying back in to the UK. So it could just completely undermine everything that Rishi Sunak's been trying to achieve with the Rwanda legislation. There will be a government appeal to this legislation. The other problem is that it reopens all of those old Brexit wounds, which Rishi Sunak thought that he'd sewn up with that Windsor framework. There will be unionists in Northern Ireland now who will be furious that basically what we're seeing now is a different immigration law, if this does hold firm after the appeal, a different immigration law in Northern Ireland to the rest of mainland Britain. Now, obviously, that imposes what is essentially a hard border between Northern Ireland and mainland Britain, which is clearly what we were trying to avoid all along with the Windsor Agreement, and which is exactly what will really, really upset Northern Irish Unionists.
Olivia, that was an excellent, excellent summary. Do you think of excellent of where we're at? Chris, I've got to bring you back in. Doesn't this prove that we never really left the orbit of Strasbourg, the Windsor framework, the Windsor knot that tied us to the EU, now turning into the Windsor noose? We can't get out of this. And this fella, Justice Humphreys, whoever this man is, needs to look into that, don't we? Has suddenly decided, actually, no, we'd rather be part of the Republic. This is chaos.
The UK will appeal. Yes, it's chaos. It's more a reflection, maybe, of the dual status of Northern Ireland. EU law applies there and UK law applies there. We heard from Rishi Sunak, though, today. He said, in terms, I won't let a foreign court, the Strasbourg court, boss us around. I will face it down. Well, it might come to that. I think he's looking at some big battles, I think, over getting his Rwanda flights off the ground before the end of June, if that happens. And maybe this battle in Northern Ireland is the first of that.
And you mentioned a great point there about the electorate, because we've seen bedlam in Dublin, south of the border. We saw an astonishing report last week, Olivia, where over 50% of those in the Republic want stronger border controls to stop asylum seekers coming over the border from Northern Ireland into Ireland. Perhaps they might be happy, actually. All of a sudden, they don't need to even bother crossing the border into the Republic. They could simply go to Belfast and hold fire and never get deported.
Well, Rishi Sunak has been crowing in recent weeks because Ireland is seeing an uptick in illegal migration. And Rishi Sunak says that's because his Rwanda bill is working. Migrants are going to the Republic of Ireland instead of to the UK. Well, he'll be laughing on the other side of his face now because it looks as though migrants will now be going to Northern Ireland as well as the Republic of Ireland to get around Rishi Sunak's Rwanda legislation. And, of course, Northern Ireland is part of the UK and is very much Rishi Sunak's problem.
And, Chris, politically, that's a massive, massive headache and annoyance for the unionists in Belfast. Suddenly, it's like, well, you know, sovereignty means nothing.
And that's the point of Brexit for many of those DUP MPs, the peers, Arlene Foster and the like. They know what sovereignty is. They fought for it, and this is why they're so concerned about it.
Chris Hope, Olivia Utley, a depressing topic, but brilliantly done. Thank you very much. Great stuff. Really enjoyed that. Now, moving on, it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to enjoy a spectacular summer with an extra £20,000 tax-free cash in your bank account. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and here's how it could all be yours.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing. Just go for it. It's an absolute must. You must try and go for it.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Up next, British troops have been warned that Russian agents could be spying on their mobile phones. And following the Ministry of Defence hack, I want to know if our soldiers are truly safe from foreign powers. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, a woman who 25 years ago, at the age of just 14, tortured and killed her 71-year-old grandmother was last month released from prison on licence.
But this isn't the first time she's been let out. Sarah Davey has been bailed and reincarcerated no less than 7 times.
Well, to debate this, we're joined by former Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton, famed for catching the notorious killer of Millie Dowler, Levi Belfield, and GB News' own Patrick Christie's.
I think we have to qualify that where the killer is a child, and we have to accept that to consign somebody to be in prison for 60, 70 or 80 years is probably something that we ought to think twice about. So I understand why this happens. I understand the outrage. I really understand the outrage. I think that 14-year-olds who kill should be given a chance to rehabilitate? Yes, I do. Do I think that somebody who's had 7 such chances and blown them away deserves an 8th chance? Then probably I think that's a lot more doubtful.
I would have thought that by chance, sort of 3 or 4, they'd have got the picture, but clearly not. Patrick, what do you make of it all?
Well, some people are born evil, aren't they? And why should we have to suffer to have them back out on the streets? There are some crimes that are so serious that you should pay for it either with your life or for the rest of your life. This was a sadistic murder, the details of which absolutely cannot be read out on air at this particular time of day. There are 3 issues here. Is this justice for the families of victims. I just think a release like this is a slap in the face, really, to us all. It's another example of soft justice. And just because she's a child, well, she was old enough to commit the heinous crime she committed.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Earlier on breakfast. Brexit Britain, what was Brexit about? It was about taking back control. It was about us being in charge of these big decisions.
Starting this debate of undermining it rather than reforming it.
Oh, I think it undermined itself.
The Prime Minister is going to set out the kind of wider threat to the country from countries like Russia and China.
But the reality is Nigeria is, it's an interesting venue for them. Meghan says she's a feminist, and the U.S. Department of Justice still is concerned with things like child brides and child labor. And
Hillary Clinton comes in and goes, pretending she knows people in the room.
From 6, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 4:23. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll be joined by England cricket legend David Gower, who will give his reaction to the news that the great James Anderson will be retiring from cricket this summer. Now, British soldiers have been warned that Russian agents could be spying on their mobile phones. Troops who are on exercises in Estonia near the country's border with Russia have been told operatives could access personal contact details of loved ones from their phones. A hugely concerning story, and to discuss it, I'm now joined by the former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD, friend of mine, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, always a delight to have you on the show. So, we had a hack last week. 75,000 servicemen, their MOD payroll details were hacked, including personal addresses. Very concerning. This latest one also very, very alarming for anybody serving on foreign soil. To know that their loved ones' details could be hacked by a malevolent force is very, very worrying.
Yeah, and I think really you need to understand about how smartphones work and to make sure that anyone who's in a sensitive position or in operations with the military doesn't actually take them. So the first thing is that at a formation level, then they produce targeting data. That is exactly the reason, for example, that General Gerasimov, the chief of the General Staff of Russia, was nearly killed on the 1st of March 22 based on signals intelligence. It was augmented targeting based on data processing and data-centric metadata, that is data about data. So if you take a mobile phone with you on operational security, you are likely to die, because if a number of people have those phones together, that gives a number of targeting data, and the sensor to shooter time these days with the speed of operations operating almost at the speed of light means that it is absolutely phenomenally bad to do that. The second one is on the individual level, where it's always been had the capability of a foreign power to exfiltrate data if you post too much stuff. Now, it's not just what is on your phone, it's what you post on social media for. So, for example, a well-known social media site can predict your race, personality, sexual orientation, political ideology, relationship status, drug use, just based on your likes alone. If you then correlate that with another social media site which you put your likes on, you would have enough targeting data there, for example, to take part in social engineering, what we call, that is phishing attacks, whale phishing or spear phishing, and that gives you predictive analytics to compromise those people, and compromise is generally getting someone to work for you based on either revenge, ideology, money or ego. So you've got to be very, very careful. That is why really people in the forces should not be on social media whilst they are serving. I never was when I was serving.
I mean, there are two big points there. Firstly, are the social media companies in that case doing enough to protect the data of service people? And secondly, it wouldn't take a rocket science to work out if you were able to take the personal contact details from phones. It was your mum, dad, your partner. You'd very quickly be able to work out the family networks and even the locations of the loved ones of servicemen. And that in itself, Chip Chapman, is a huge security risk.
That's right. That's exactly what metadata is. It's data about data. It's correlating the data sets together. And that's a powerful thing. That's what really all the social media companies do. You know, we are the customer. That's what we are these days in terms of mobile phones and social media sites. And it's really, really worrying in other means too. So, for example, we've seen examples where a well-known fitness site putting your data online or uploading your data means that special forces bases have been compromised, the patrol routes and runs of people are being compromised. That's why those sorts of apps are banned by the American military. And apps really take a lot of your data. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Location data itself is very, very powerful stuff. So the global positioning system on your smartphone, for example, can pinpoint where you are to within 16 to 27 feet, which is why if you go to Nottingham, you'll probably have adverts for Nottingham when you get there, Martin.
So is the answer, Chip, almost to go back in time? You know, we keep children safe by giving them old brick phones, old Nokias. Is the answer to do something similar with servicemen? You know, don't let them have a smartphone. Don't let them have geo-targeting, sat-nav things built in. Just go back. If you want to phone your mum, your dad, your loved ones, you can text them, but get them back to basics. Strip away the tech.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, we live in a digital age, but we've got to have a reversionary mode to the analog age. And you're absolutely right. The old non-smartphones, the days of the Nokia bricks, are the way to do that. You know, don't have any apps if you really want to be secure. But in the modern age, we like convenient and we like free. And the result of that is we all give up a lot of our privacy without knowing it. It's why we don't read the 100 pages of text that they send us, and we just click on the I accept. It's worth also saying that a cookie which follows you around is really a persistent identifier. That's what a cookie is. No one has their privacy these days using these types of devices.
And Chip, while I have you here, can I get your reaction to the Prime Minister's comments today? He's saying that we are approaching our most dangerous years. We are being targeted by malign forces, authoritarian states, Russia, China, North Korea and Iran. Is that true, or is he cooking up some kind of phony war to play the politics of fear?
Well, both. So it follows on from a message from General Cavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, on the 12th of April, who said a very similar thing about the CRINC nations, as we call them, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And of course, we've got the 75th anniversary of the NATO coming up, the Washington summit. So his 2.5% is probably a precursor to trying to get that raised across the alliance at the Washington summit.
OK, thank you. Expert, as ever, Major General Chip Chapman. Thank you for joining us on the show. Now, I've had hundreds of comments coming in. I want to read a quick couple out before we go to the news. On the crime data, should we collect the nationality of crime data? Basically, Susan says this, absolutely they should, but we all know they won't. More political game playing. Neil says most certainly, and it should be linked to visa acceptance too. And I love this one from Diana. Diana says, if diversity really is our strength, then the data will surely support that. So yes, let's see the truth. Nothing to fear here, right. Now up next, J.K. Rowling has once again found herself at the centre of another transgender controversy. This time she's called out the manager of Sutton United Women. Find out next what she said. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But first, it's your headlines, and it's Tamsin Roberts.
Martin, thanks very much. Here are the headlines from the GB Newsroom. It's 4:30. Rishi Sunak has warned that giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would leave the country less safe. Setting out his pre-election pitch to voters, the Prime Minister said protecting people during what he called the dangerous but transformational times ahead is something only the Conservatives can do. In the US, Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, has taken to the witness stand at his criminal trial. He's expected to testify that he helped Mr. Trump illegally hide a so-called hush money payment to the former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Cohen used to be one of the former president's most trusted colleagues, but he's now the prosecution's star witness at the trial in New York, which enters its 5th week. A judge has ruled that parts of the government's Rwanda plan should not be applied in Northern Ireland. The High Court in Belfast determined that aspects of the Illegal Migration Act are incompatible with human rights laws and would breach the Good Friday Agreement. The UK government will have the chance to appeal before another hearing later this month. A man is facing life in prison for murdering a woman during a series of violent attacks in South London. 34-year-old Mohamed Nur was armed with a makeshift blade when he attacked Yohanita Kosi Wagdogbe in broad daylight last May. He admitted her murder and having a blade made from scissors, but denied carrying out similar attacks in the days before her death. Well, those are the top stories, and for all the latest, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or simply go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now, in a few minutes' time, I'll discuss the news that obese people are up to twice as likely to take time off work for being sick. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 eastbound in Manchester. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle just after junction 19 for Hayward. The usual queues in the West Midlands on the M5 northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Estimated travel time there around 25 minutes. Queues on the M5 northbound in Gloucestershire. There's a lane closed for recovery work following an accident at junction 11A for Gloucester. Queues going back towards the Gloucester services. Long delays on the M1 southbound in Bedfordshire. There's a lane closed for a broken down lorry if you're heading between junction 11 Dunstable South to junction 10 the Luton Airport Spur Road, not helped by roadworks nearby. And we've got the usual queues in Kent on the M25 Dartford Tunnel anti-clockwise at junction 1A for Dartford. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the dates on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Okay.
Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
Welcome back, it's 4:36. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, J.K. Rowling has branded a transgender football manager as a straight, white, middle-aged bloke. Lucy Clark, who's been appointed manager of Sutton United's women's team, you can see Lucy on your screen now, responded saying, "Another day of hate-fueled transphobia against me." Now, Rowling's comments have resulted in her being accused, of course, of bullying as she continues her rampage on social media. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, Fiona McInerney. Welcome to the show, Fiona. Always a pleasure to have your company. J.K. Rowling, once again, proving utterly fearless in her pursuit of free speech along the areas of transgenderism. Do you think here she's got a point? Do you think, however, she might be being accused of being transphobic?
What she's doing here is important. This isn't about a football manager. It's about challenging the taboo that says you're not allowed to say the true sex of a person if that person claims a transgender identity. And it's because she's speaking the truth that people are saying it's cruel or it's not allowed or it's transphobic. Because especially women have been have had this constraint imposed on us that we are not allowed to say when we see a male and when it matters. But sometimes we have to be able to say that. You know, how can we talk about single-sex spaces and how can we protect those spaces if we're not allowed to state the facts? We have to be able to say who's male and who's female, and that is not a slur. You know, to say someone is a male or female is merely a statement of fact.
Now, the manager in question, Lucy Clark, who was formerly known as Nick Clark, responded on social media by saying, "Another day of hate-fueled transphobia against me. But hey, guess what? I'm living my best life. I'm waking up every day and my beautiful family are around me. Every day I laugh and have things to look forward to. Who's winning at life? The one who's happy or those hating?" What would you say to that? That Lucy apparently is well liked by the team, should be left to get on with their job. What business is it of J.K. Rowling's?
Yeah, good luck to Lucy. You know, people of both sexes manage football teams. That's nothing new. That's not the story. The reason we're talking about this is because a pride group claimed on X that this is increasing diversity in football. And J.K. Rowling is merely pointing out that football management in particular has always been male dominated. And the addition of Lucy Smith to the management roster doesn't do anything to change that. So she's pushing the boundaries on behalf of the rest of us to be able to speak the truth. You know, this notion of it being unkind or transphobic, that's just another way to say no debate. And I think that era is over. And the era of telling women to be kind and keep quiet for the sake of respecting male feelings, I'm afraid this is a boundary now that we're not going to accept.
OK, superb. And very quickly, it's worth pointing out that when J.K. Rowling was accused of bullying, punching down and transphobia, she said, "You're right. No demographic is more vulnerable and oppressed than large tattooed cross-dressers who gets plum jobs in women's sport. I don't know how I could have been so cruel." Tongue firmly in cheek there from J.K. Rowling. Thanks for joining us, as ever, Fiona McInerney, who's the Director, of course, of Campaigns at Sex Matters. Thanks for joining us on the show. There's lots more still to come on the show, and we'll discuss the inquiry that's found that good care for pregnant women is the exception rather than the rule. Apparently, civil servants are against the plan. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, time for the latest forecast with the Met Office for GB News. Warm and bright once again in the east today, but cloudier and cooler elsewhere with outbreaks of rain moving steadily in from the west to the east because of this area of low pressure, which has displaced the high that brought us so much fine weather over the last week or so. That fine weather persists just about into the evening for eastern England, northeast Scotland. It's cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain that have been persisting in the west through the day. They will move their way eastwards as the night progresses. The rain becomes a bit more fragmented, so it's on and off rain across western Scotland, northern and central England. Some clear spells towards the west and a chilly feel here first thing, single figures, but for many others it's 12 to 15 Celsius as we begin the day on Tuesday, and frequent showers appearing into the southwest and South Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Some of these could be quite heavy and slow moving. They will be accompanied by thunder in the far southwest, but some brightness in between, so feeling a bit more pleasant perhaps compared with Monday's weather. In the east, though, a real change of weather compared with the last few days. Cloudy, outbreaks of rain and a lot of low cloud. We've still got that low cloud on Wednesday morning across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland. Brighter skies towards the west, but again, a day of sunny spells and showers. And really, sunny spells and showers, the theme on Thursday and Friday as well.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:43. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, hundreds of you have been getting in touch with your says throughout the show. The recording of the nationality of crime data has got you going. So has Northern Ireland. We just heard during the show the news that the Rwanda bill will be disapplied in Northern Ireland by a judge who said that people can't be deported from Northern Ireland, which basically puts them in the same jurisdiction as the Republic of Ireland and not the United Kingdom. Anthony says this: Northern Ireland should simply be ignored. That's to the point. Lynn says this: don't give Northern Ireland any extra money. If they want the asylum seekers, they can have them. Let's see how long that one lasts and how that works out for them. Martin adds this: it's time to leave the ECHR and frame our own Bill of Rights, because the judge there has said that the European Court of Human Rights, the legislation there, trumps that of the United Kingdom. He basically thinks that Northern Ireland should be under the rule of the ECHR. Many people saying this proves that Northern Ireland never really left the orbit of Strasbourg. The Windsor arrangement turned out to be a Windsor knot that tied us to Strasbourg. Brian says this: can see all of Ireland kicking off badly with the European Union soon. Brian, of course, is referring to the fact we're about to see elections in June, EU-wide elections, and there's a prediction that Eurosceptic parties might make big gains in the Republic of Ireland, despite the fact, of course, they are very Europhilic ordinarily. But since the huge increase in asylum seekers south of the border, an astonishing report last week said that 50% of people in the Republic now backed stronger border controls to stop those asylum seekers getting in. Who would have thought that could ever have happened during the Brexit years? And Adrian says this: the bottom line, we're importing criminals. We have both the Tories and the Labour Party to thank for that. It's got some more views quickly on Northern Ireland here. If Northern Ireland, this is Jazz. Jazz says this: if Northern Ireland want to abide by the ECHR, then go and join Ireland and leave us all in peace. Well, Jazz, a lot of people are calling for a united Ireland. Perhaps this judge might be one of them. Will be interesting to know what Justice Humphreys, what his politics are. He certainly put his head above the parapet today and is getting a lot of flack for it. Quickly now, Mark adds this: as far as I'm aware, Northern Ireland is a part of the UK. Personally, I'm surprised the Belfast courts would overrule Westminster. The big question is, why? And another one here from Nigel, not Nigel Farage, I think. Can Northern Ireland return illegal migrants back to Europe under the Dublin Agreement if they come under EU law? I don't think they can. The whole point is they are part of the United Kingdom, and the Rwanda bill, until Justice Humphreys made this ruling earlier on today, which, by the way, will surely be challenged by the British Supreme Court. Until then, Northern Ireland was a part of the regulatory framework that the Rwanda bill occupied under. Now, moving on, thanks for those comments. I'll get to more before the end of the show. Moving on to a very worrying story, because an inquiry has found that new mothers risk suffering lifelong injuries as hospitals cover up endemic failures in Britain's maternity system. Well, the country's first parliamentary inquiry into birth trauma also reported that good care for pregnant women is now the exception rather than the rule. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by Labour MP Rosie Duffield and the Tory MP Theo Clarke, and they co-chaired the inquiry, and they join us now from College Green outside Parliament. Thank you for joining us to both of you. Can I first say how wonderful it is to see you guys putting aside your political differences and joining together on an issue which is so vitally important. Well done on that. It's fantastic to see people putting together for the common good. We need more of that in politics. Putting that to one side, Rosie, let's start with you. A lot of people reading this will be very, very horrified and surprised to hear that the type of maternal care and maternity care being offered to British mums is falling way short of the required levels. What did you find?
Well, I was involved with the Kirkup inquiry in East Kent a couple of years ago, and so I just sort of assumed it was an issue that was local to me. But Theo also had a similar inquiry in her area, and I think we were both surprised by how rife these problems were throughout the country.
OK, and Theo, you decided to put this report together. And what are your recommendations? What would you like to see happen?
So firstly, I think Rose and I were both struck by the huge volume of submissions that we received from the British public. Over 1,300 women wrote to us with their stories. And I think what was immediately apparent when we were reviewing the testimonials was that this was, as Rosie said, not just one part of the UK where it was an issue, but it seems to be that there is, sadly, a postcode lottery on maternity services in this country. And I personally don't think that's acceptable, that where you live could literally result in you receiving a different level of care. So one of our headline recommendations in our report to the Prime Minister is to call for a national maternity framework which would set out a standardised level of care to all hospital trusts, and secondly to have a maternity commissioner or a new mumsar who'd be responsible for implementing that. And I think that's crucial that that person reports directly to the Prime Minister, because we must end the postcode lottery and listen to mums.
Absolutely.
And Rosie, one of the very concerning lines from the report is that it found that women were treated as an inconvenience and errors were covered up by hospitals who frustrated parents' efforts to find answers. I went through a very traumatic birth, well, my wife did. When I witnessed that, it was very, very difficult. The hospital, I think, were quite worried about the outcome. Rather than protecting the mother, they seem more concerned about there not being any bad news coming out of it. Is that what you're finding here, that mothers who experience poor care, they're more or less treated as a problem to be managed rather than somebody to be helped at their weakest hours?
Yeah, and I'm really sorry that you and your wife had that experience. Some of the things that we've been told will stay with us both forever, and nobody should experience that. But you're right, instead of being seen as an inconvenience, and I think people are really frightened now of litigation and people suing them, and the hospital trusts are really scared of that after some of these big inquiries. The patient and the baby should obviously be the number one concern, and the family involved.
OK, and mothers obviously open up with very intimate stories to both of you. How moved were you by some of those tales, and how brave do you think those mothers have been? Because this is a very, very difficult thing to talk about.
Well, I've obviously talked very publicly about my own traumatic birth, giving a speech in the House of Commons, so I know how incredibly difficult it is for mothers to come forward. So firstly, can I welcome so many mums that did, and I can say that every single response was read, and their submissions did inform the work of our inquiry. And it's interesting what you mentioned just then about fathers. I think I was quite struck that we didn't just receive recommendations from mothers, but also from dads and partners too. And I think there was one example that will really stay with me when a father said to us in his oral evidence that the only time he was spoken to in labour was to ask, did he want to save his wife or his child? And that's completely unacceptable. This is not stuff that requires additional funding. This is about compassion, this is about empathy, and this is about a duty of care that the NHS has to its patients. And I was really shocked by some of the examples of language that we heard.
Yeah, and I know that primarily childbirth is, of course, about the mothers who should be protected and nurtured at all costs. But you're absolutely right, and thank you for mentioning that, because when a father-to-be witnesses a very traumatic birth, often involving surgery and all sorts of things that you're never, ever prepared for. It's a very, very traumatic thing to witness, especially as you feel so powerless to intervene. How hopeful are you that your framework, your plan, will be implemented?
I'm really hopeful. I mean, Theo's already met with the Prime Minister and given him a copy of the report, and we know that the Secretary of State, who's coming to our official launch soon, is really keen to make some of our recommendations, if she can't do all of them, part of her women's health strategy, and that's fantastic news.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, thank you for joining us and sharing your knowledge of such a worthwhile report. Thank you very much. That's the Labour MP Rosie Duffield and the Tory MP Theo Clarke. And once again, well done on coming together and putting your party politics to one side. They think it's just great to see that. You know, normally people should be tearing lumps out of each other in the Commons, but there they are with a common cause, putting all that to one side and sticking up for mothers, both in their constituencies and across the country. And a little nod there to fathers. I know it's not about the dads, I know it's not, but I'm just saying it can be traumatic too when you see surgery and all the rest of it and things start to go very, very wrong and you're never ever prepared for any of that in life. That's what happened to me. And suddenly when you think things can go very, very wrong, my first boy, came very, very close to not making it when he was born. And, you know, when that happens in front of you, you have no idea. You're all taught about storks and unicorns and the magic of parenthood. You're never prepared for what comes at you very, very fast. And to find out that mothers and some fathers, but ostensibly mothers, of course, are getting the brunt of this on maternity wards and not being cared for, not being nurtured and cherished at their most vulnerable time is incredibly hard to take. And hats off to both of them there. And hats off to both of them for sticking up for mothers in need. I love it. OK, Rishi Sunak has warned of an axis of authoritarian states that are trying to undermine the country. And he says that the Tories are best placed to deliver a secure future for the UK. But, of course, Sir Keir Starmer has dismissed the Prime Minister's claim that the UK will be less safe under a Labour government. Is that true? Do you think this actually washes? Is this the politics of fear? We're told every day, it seems, that World War III is just around the corner. Is this trying to scare us in submission? Is it rattling up votes? Is it a phony war? Or are we facing an actual, escalated, very, very real threat? We'll have all of that. And, of course, the huge story about should we record the nationality of criminals to ascertain who's committing the most crime. That's all coming next. But first, it's your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, time for the latest forecast with the Met Office for GB News. Warm and bright once again in the east today, but cloudier and cooler elsewhere with outbreaks of rain moving steadily in from the west to the east because of this area of low pressure which has displaced the high that brought us so much fine weather over the last week or so. That fine weather persists just about into the evening for eastern England, northeast Scotland. It's cloudier skies. Outbreaks of rain that have been persisting in the west through the day. They will move their way eastwards as the night progresses. The rain becomes a bit more fragmented, so it's on and off rain across western Scotland, northern and central England. Some clear spells towards the west and a chilly feel here first thing, single figures, but for many others it's 12 to 15 Celsius as we begin the day on Tuesday, and frequent showers appearing into the southwest and South Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Some of these could be quite heavy and slow moving. They will be accompanied by thunder in the far southwest, but some brightness in between, so feeling a bit more pleasant perhaps compared with Monday's weather. In the east, though, a real change of weather compared with the last few days. Cloudy, outbreaks of rain and a lot of low cloud. We've still got that low cloud on Wednesday morning across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland. Brighter skies towards the west, but again, a day of sunny spells and showers. And really, sunny spells and showers, the theme on Thursday and Friday as well.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M6 northbound in Cheshire between junction 21A, the Croft interchange, heading towards junction 23 for Haydock. Slow for the M62 eastbound in Manchester, just after junction 19 Hayward. There's a lane closed there due to a broken down vehicle. The usual slow traffic on the M5 northbound in the West Midlands, heading up to junction 8 of the M6. Estimated travel time around 25 minutes. Delays on the M5 northbound in Gloucestershire due to an earlier accident at junction 11A for Gloucester. All lanes have reopened though, so that congestion should hopefully start to ease. Long delays on the M1 southbound in Bedfordshire due to an earlier broken down lorry in the roadworks area between junction 11 Dunstable South and 10 the Luton Airport Spur Road. That's the latest traffic and travel.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns,
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
in 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, Rishi Sunak says the UK faces an axis of evil from authoritarian states such as China, Russia, North Korea and Iran. The Prime Minister claims we are moving into the most dangerous years our country has ever known. But is this true, or is it simply the politics of fear? Next up, the Rwanda bill has been given yet another massive blow as a judge in Northern Ireland has disapplied it there, meaning that asylum seekers cannot be deported from Northern Ireland. Does this prove that we never got sovereignty with Brexit and the European Court of Human Rights once again still rules the roost? And one of England's greatest ever cricketers will retire this summer. The curtain will fall on James Anderson's incredible career in July, and I'll be joined by the legendary former England captain, Captain David Gower. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. Shortly, I'll be joined by Johnny Mercer to talk about what Rishi Sunak is saying today. We are facing our most dangerous years ahead. Apparently, Russia, China, North Korea and Iran are malign forces, authoritarian regimes seeking to undermine us. Rishi Sunak's point is that the country will be much less safe under a Labour government. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer has denied that. Is this true? Or is it all just a phony war to get voters out and vote for the Conservative Party? I'll ask that to Johnny Mercer shortly. Send your views and post your comments by going to gbnews.com/your say. Get stuck in. I'll read a bunch out before the end of the show. But before all of that, it's your latest news headlines, and it's with Tamsin Roberts.
Martin, thanks very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 5:02. Rishi Sunak has warned that giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would leave the country less safe. Setting out his pre-election pitch to voters, the Prime Minister said protecting people during what he called the dangerous but transformational times ahead is something only the Conservatives can do.
Despite having 14 years with nothing to do but think about the future, Labour have almost nothing to say about it. No plans for our border, no plans for our energy security, no plans for our economy either, and no principles either. Keir Starmer's gone from embracing Jeremy Corbyn to Natalie Elphicke, all in the cynical pursuit of power at any price. So Labour have no ideas. What they did have, they've U-turned on.
The Health Secretary has defended the government's record on maternity care after a major new report revealed endemic failures at hospitals. It found mums-to-be are often treated as an inconvenience, with some women mocked or shouted at and denied basic needs such as pain relief. The Birth Trauma Inquiry is calling for a national plan to improve services, led by a new maternity commissioner who would report directly to the Prime Minister. But Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says the government is moving to ensure vulnerable women are supported.
And we know that there are some parts of the country that are doing this really well, but there are other parts that need to catch up. And so what we are doing now through our maternity programmes is ensuring that, for example, the most vulnerable women who perhaps are living with mental health conditions at the moment, who then become pregnant, that we are building a network of support around them to support them through pregnancy and indeed beyond pregnancy when they have their newborn baby, because we know that that can be a factor, for example, that has such an impact on their well-being and the well-being of their babies.
A judge has ruled that parts of the government's Rwanda plan should not be applied in Northern Ireland. The High Court in Belfast determined that aspects of the Illegal Migration Act are incompatible with human rights laws and would breach the Good Friday Agreement. The UK government will have the chance to appeal before another hearing later this month. In the US, Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has taken to the witness stand at his criminal trial. He told jurors moments ago that he secretly colluded with Mr. Trump and a tabloid publisher to suppress negative stories that could damage Trump's 2016 campaign. Mr. Cohen used to be one of the former president's most trusted colleagues, but he's now the prosecution's star witness as the so-called hush money trial enters its 5th week. And a new poll is giving Donald Trump a lead in 5 key states. The cost of living and the war in Gaza are said to have driven down support for President Biden in key states, including Michigan, Nevada and Pennsylvania. The survey by the New York Times, Siena College and the Philadelphia Inquirer found the president now leads in just one battleground state, Wisconsin. A teacher accused of having intimate relationships with teenage boys says she craved attention after a breakup, but denies the allegations against her. Rebecca Jones says she struggled following the breakdown of a 9-year relationship, and during the COVID lockdowns. The 30-year-old was already suspended from her high school job and on bail following alleged intimate contact with 2 teenage boys. She pleaded not guilty to 6 charges. Her trial at Manchester Crown Court is continuing. A man is facing life in prison for murdering a woman during a series of violent attacks in South London. 34-year-old Mohammed Noor was armed with a makeshift blade when he attacked Yohanita Kosiwa Dogbe in broad daylight last May. He admitted her murder and to having a blade made from scissors, but denied carrying out similar attacks in the days before her death. 3 men have appeared in court accused of assisting the Hong Kong Intelligence Service. It follows an investigation led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command, where 11 people were detained. The men, aged 37, 38 and 63, will appear at the Old Bailey on the 24th of May. The King has officially handed over the role of Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps to the Prince of Wales. In a rare engagement involving both the current monarch and his heir, His Majesty formally handed over the title he's held for the past 32 years. The King said it was a great joy to meet servicemen during today's visit to Middle Wallop in Hampshire. Prince William will now represent the Army's Air Wing, which includes the unit once served in by his brother. Well, those are the top stories. And for all the latest, sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Martin.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now it starts with a warning, a stark warning from Rishi Sunak. He said an axis of authoritarian states are trying to undermine the country. And he claims the Conservatives are best placed to deliver a secure future for the UK. And meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has dismissed Rishi Sunak's claim that the country will be less safe under a Labour government, as you'd expect. And the Prime Minister said Sir Keir's refusal to adopt the government's plan to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence sent the wrong message. Well, I'm joined in our studio in Westminster by GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, here we go. The election is in full swing. First shots fired on the topic of defence. The big question is this true? We seem to hear every week about World War III breaking out, or is it a phony war to rattle up votes?
There are concerns expressed by Grant Shapps, Defence Secretary. He said we're in a pre-war period now, and that was the moment when it reset the whole tone. We heard from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, in Berlin. Similar language. Last week, Lord Cameron, David Cameron, former Foreign Secretary, saying other countries must get to 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. And that's the context for this speech. The number 10 clearly think that they can back Rishi Sunak as the safe choice and don't risk it with Sir Keir Starmer. He said you can't trust what this guy says. Sunak said today in this speech I was at a Policy Exchange's think tank, and notably name-checking Natalie Elphicke. How can you have a guy who can take on board a right-wing Tory MP as a Labour MP? Keir Starmer backed Jeremy Corbyn twice in 2017, 2019 elections. He wasn't trusted there on NATO or defence. So they're clearly trying to make out it's a choice. Who do you trust with keeping us safe? The basic choice anyone makes in an election.
OK, Chris Hope, stick with us, but I need to cross now to former Labour advisor Stella Chadikidu, who joins me on the show. Always a pleasure. Are you there, Stella? Welcome to the show. She is there, Stella, always a pleasure. So, you remember, Stella, of course, during the 2019 general election, it was always Jeremy Corbyn, can't be trusted. He's going to scrap Trident. He's a red under the bed. He cares more about Moscow than he does about the United Kingdom. Does today's attack on Sir Keir Starmer feel reminiscent of that? Is it all a bit of a damp squib?
I think Rishi Sunak is feeling very melancholic about the good old days of Jeremy Corbyn, where the Conservatives could play in the subject area where they felt the most comfortable and the more trusted. Of course, he would make a speech about security, about international security, at the time when the public is the most concerned about things where he knows he's weak on. And these are the cost of living crisis, housing, and the NHS. And I'm afraid that Rishi Sunak has not delivered on these areas. And you know what I found the most interesting? I found the most interesting how you were saying that Keir Starmer is trying to create this doom loop for the voters, so that the voters will be so depressed that they will have no choice but to vote for him, when in fact he's doing exactly the same thing. I mean, the speech today was painting a nightmare scenario where the whole world is a threat to the UK, so they should vote for the devil they know rather than someone who they haven't tested yet.
I suppose, in a sense, Stella, that Sir Keir Starmer might be happy that we're not talking about Natalie Elphicke. I mean, this is probably what the Conservative Party want. They want to get the conversation away from the defection. They want to get it back onto bread and butter issues such as the defence of the realm. But in a sense, has this gifted Sir Keir Starmer another great diversion? We're not talking about the fact that all the skeletons in Natalie Elphicke's closet are coming back to haunt now the Labour Party.
I don't think so. If anything, I think that Keir Starmer wants people to talk about her, because what he will want voters to say, especially GBNews viewers, is, look, I have admitted into my party this member of parliament who's best known for her extremely strong stance on immigration. So if this member of parliament, who has been so staunch on her anti-immigration rhetoric and on how disappointed he is at the lack of results from Rishi Sunak's premiership on the small vote crisis, then what does that mean for the rest of you voters? Come to the Labour Party. You're all welcome. Vote for Keir Starmer. That's what he's saying, basically. So, if anything, I think he's quite sad we're not talking about this more.
OK, superb. Thank you, Stella. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Speak to you again soon. Chris, is that the point? Do you think that is true? I mean, you were saying earlier that Sir Keir Starmer would be delighted that we're not talking about Natalie Elphicke, but Stella just said, actually, he would like to be talking about that because it shows that if you're a voter, you also can cross back to the Labour Party. If Natalie Elphicke, people joke, if she's any more right-wing, she'd be off the White Cliffs of Dover.
The jury's out on the Elphicke defection. I think it does cut through to ordinary voters that a Tory MP has joined the Labour Party, rats leaving a sinking ship. But I think that's given Starmer his own problems internally because of the things she said in the past about her husband, ex-husband, Charlie Elphicke, about the small boats issue attacking Sir Keir Starmer. So it kind of works both ways, I think. And in fact, you heard Rishi Sunak saying earlier that, he'll do anything to get into power, even embrace a kind of right-wing, quite a right-wing Tory MP, former Tory MP, like Natalie Elphicke.
OK, we're just waiting to get a connection with Johnny Mercer. I'm going to bring in my colleague Olivia Utley, who's patiently sat in the wings there. Let's talk about this defence issue. Does defence land with the electorate? Does it really matter? Obviously, we care about it during times of conflict, then it's a huge, huge issue. But at the moment, are people more concerned about defending our own shores from immigration, from dinghies, from the cost of living crisis? How motivational a factor is defence with the electorate?
Well, polls suggest that actually defence is increasingly a big motivational factor with the electorate, and Rishi Sunak seems to be very keen to capitalise on that. Obviously, we are in a globally insecure age. As Rishi Sunak said this morning, that there are advancing threats from Russia, from China, from Iran, and the polling does suggest that people are worried about this, particularly voters who voted Conservative in the last election. Conservative members in particular are very, very interested and worried about defence. For a long time, Ben Wallace, when he was Defence Secretary, was by far the most popular cabinet member, mostly because he kept pushing for that 3% of GDP as defence spending. So I think this is an issue that people are worried about. And I think what Rishi Sunak is particularly concerned about is that increasingly the Conservative Party isn't trusted on defence. And so some of their core voters are moving over to Labour. Today, Rishi Sunak tried to get back some ground by talking up that 2.5% defence spending, which, of course, so far Keir Starmer has failed to match. But I think the issue for him might be that for lots of people who are deeply worried about defence, 2.5% of GDP just isn't enough. 3% would be a good starting point.
OK, well, we wait to get connection with Johnny Mercer. Let's move on to another story now, one that broke at lunchtime. And it's a blow to the government's Rwanda plan. Another blow. A judge has ruled that provisions of the UK's Illegal Migration Act should be disapplied in Northern Ireland. Mr Justice Humphreys says they undermine human rights protections guaranteed in the region under post-Brexit arrangements. Let's go back to you, Olivia. An astonishing situation. So before today, the Rwanda bill applied in Northern Ireland because it's a part of the United Kingdom. Justice Humphreys, whoever that fella is, has suddenly changed his mind. Said, no, we're actually more in alignment with the Republic of Ireland. And not only that, we're dancing to the tune of Strasbourg and the European Court of Human Rights. Does this prove Brexit never got done?
Well, what this judgment says is that essentially that European law, ECHR law, is supreme in Northern Ireland over UK law. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, it means that the Immigration Act, which Rishi Sunak has just managed to get through Parliament, means that the UK as a whole can circumnavigate EU law in order to send migrants to Rwanda. What Judge Humphreys is saying here is that because of the Good Friday Agreement, which enshrines human rights, basically ECHR law, into UK law, that Rwanda bill can't be applied in Northern Ireland. Obviously, that causes a huge, huge headache for Rishi Sunak. First, because there's the risk of migrants flying over to Belfast, getting over to Belfast rather than London, and then flying back over to to mainland Britain. But also because it's going to kick up a huge fuss with Northern Irish Unionists, who will now be deeply, deeply concerned at the idea of Northern Ireland having a different immigration law to that of the rest of Britain.
Chris, an astonishing situation, and many Brexiteers will just rolling their eyes in disbelief.
And perhaps not surprised, though, because this goes to the heart of that Windsor Agreement, the framework agreement. You've got these dual sovereignty issues in the province of Northern Ireland. You've got the EU law applying there and the UK law. In some ways, that's quite a good thing, but occasionally it can be a problem here when you have issues of sovereignty.
OK, guys, stick with us, because we can now cross to Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer, who joins us on the show. Johnny, welcome to the show. Always a delight.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. Thanks for joining us on this big day for matters of defence. Can we start with the comments from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak earlier on? Britain is facing its darkest hours ahead of us. That might come as a surprise to those of us who remember the Blitz. Well, not me directly, I wasn't there, but you know what I mean. Is it really that perilous a situation that we face, Johnny, or is this actually the Prime Minister cooking up a phony war?
No, look, I think to be fair, give him a little bit more credit than that. If he's going to, as Prime Minister, give his verdict on global affairs and where we are as a nation at the moment, I think we need to listen. And, you only have to match that with what you see going on across the globe in terms of what's happening, obviously, in Ukraine, but you've got Gaza, Israel, and then those big strategic threats that we've seen from Russia and China that have been identified in the SCSR review as well. So, no, I mean, and he also sees a lot of the high side intelligence that a lot of us won't see, and that is his assessment. So, no, I don't think he's warmongering at all. I think it's an incredibly serious moment. He's absolutely right to draw attention to it.
Johnny, it's Chris Hope here in the studio with Martin. Just to quickly ask you, the PM made very clear he felt that there were question marks about whether the country would be safer under a Keir Starmer-led government. You're the Veterans Minister. What do veterans think about Sir Keir Starmer and his character to keep us all safe?
Look, I think, you've got to be clear with people. We're going to a general election where there are serious issues at stake. The country is at stake. It is not a game. It's a serious matter. And people like me actually fought under a Labour government before, where we were dealing with extremely poor equipment. Individuals were killed. They died. They lost their life because of a lack of equipment in operations in places like Iraq. So I'm afraid I can't take Labour seriously on defence. I can't take what they say about it seriously. And you can only, bring that to the present day. You've seen the Prime Minister commit to 2.5% of GDP on defence, and Keir Starmer says, well, we'll do that when conditions allow. It's a typical sort of willy washing kind of a grey promise from Keir Starmer that actually, you can have no real confidence in. And, for me, it's a serious moment. It's a serious time for serious people, and Labour do not have a serious contribution on defence.
And Johnny, certainly during the 2019 general election, I was knocking on a lot of doors then, and a lot of Labour voters were basically saying, stay away from my property if you represent Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn was very, very disliked by the veterans community, very mistrusted, of course, on Trident, on the state of the nation, on everything. Do you think it's fair, though, to apply the same criticisms towards Sir Keir Starmer?
Look, I think what the public like in their politicians is consistency, principles, values and integrity. And if you're going to try and make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister twice, an individual who has wanted to turn the army into a peace corps, wanted to leave NATO, get rid of the nuclear deterrent, and then only 5 years later come back and pretend you're the party of defence. What I would gently suggest is that the British public are not that stupid, and that we need to give them a bit more respect and recognise that, Labour will, of course, say anything. I mean, they'll accept anybody, they'll say anything, they'll do anything simply to have a clutch at power. And that's why you're seeing them talk about defence now. It's not credible to try and make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister twice and then less than 5 years later come back and say, oh, forget about that. We've redesigned ourselves. Now we believe in what's our fundamental principles. These are not policy decisions on a whim. These are fundamental principles around national security. The British Army leaving NATO, trident deterrent. I just think it's not credible. It's not serious. And we should be seriously interrogating their plans and their statements on defence.
And Johnny, may I ask you, several deadlines have now approached or even passed around yourself, around those giving up the sources for those alleged war crimes taken part. May I ask you, do you fear you may go to jail?
So you'll forgive me, but obviously that is an incredibly serious process. It's a legal process. It's going through the courts at the moment in a public inquiry. It'd be completely unprofessional and disrespectful to the inquiry to say anything outside that courtroom, I'm afraid.
OK. Chris?
Well, Johnny, I don't want to push you too hard on that, but have you thought about the impact on your family were that to happen? I mean, it's quite a big thing for anyone to contemplate for you.
Chris, I got to be honest. I'm not going to say anything on this because I think it's unprofessional. I think it's disrespectful to the inquiry.
OK, Johnny Mercer, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us on the show. Thanks for your time on this important day. Appreciate that. So let's cut back to you, Chris. Obviously, we had to ask the question.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a man who, on paper, is prepared to go to prison on principle by refusing to put those names out there. It's an incredible situation, and it's one that's been going on for a while, but he wouldn't be drawn for now. People are saying in Parliament that they think he might go to prison because he is refusing to give out names to support this inquiry into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. I just wondered how it might affect his wife, Felicity, who I've met, and his family. He's a dad. I mean, he's doing a lot here to protect his comrades. I think that has a lot about him, maybe, and whether he'll be able to go as far as to do that and risk prison is something. Yeah, I think it would have been a dereliction of our duty to have not asked him that question. He clearly didn't want to answer it, but no problem. Thank you very much. Chris Hope, Olivia Utley, thank you very much for joining me in the studio, and thanks out there for being patient as we got connection to Johnny Mercer. Now, the race for the White House is hotting up. You say that again, and Donald Trump has a stark warning for pro-Palestine protesters. He's threatening to deport them. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Humza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the Clype's Charter.
Clype, a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerned rows of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and that's taken up the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:27. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll be joined by England cricket legend David Gower, who will be giving his reaction to the news that the great James Anderson will retire this summer. But before that, got a few of your says to read out, reacting to the fact that J.K. Rowling has once again put the cat amongst the pigeons, to say the least, by saying that Lucy Clogg, who was formerly known as Nick, a trans manager for City United women's team, J.K. Rowling called Lucy a straight, white, middle-aged bloke, and that's caused some consternation. Michael says this: she only said he was a straight, white, middle-aged bloke because he is a straight, white, middle-aged bloke. Well, that's exactly the point she made, and apparently Police Scotland said it wasn't a hate crime. Quickly, Les says this: JKR is correct. Lucy is definitely a bloke. Now, quickly moving on, reports suggest that Donald Trump still leads Joe Biden in 5 of the 6 swing states. The former president held a rally in Wildwood in New Jersey over the weekend. And after the recent pro-Palestine protests at American university campuses, Trump said he'd take a hardline stance on similar behaviour if he wins the November election.
When I'm president, we will not allow our colleges to be taken over by violent radicals. And if you come here from another country and try to bring jihadism or anti-Americanism or anti-Semitism to our campuses, we will immediately deport you. You'll be out of that school.
Well, I think we can safely say that's the nuclear option on this topic, and I'm now joined by US political commentator Laurie Laird. Laurie, welcome to the show. So straight talking, as you'd expect from the Don. He's going to deport the lot of them. Went down well with the rally, but how's it been received across the wider American media? Much clutching of pearls, I'd imagine.
Oh, I think a lot of the media has moved on to court proceedings today and those polls that you mentioned. But let's go back just for a moment to that rally in Wildwood, which I have to tell you was a place I misspent quite a bit of my youth. Wildwood is usually quite a Republican, it's quite a Democratic state. But the crowds there, local media estimated, and this isn't Trump's people, local media estimated at 80,000. Trump actually said he had a bigger crowd than Bruce Springsteen, which he was a real local hero. He might have been right about that.
So clearly he's saying all the most incendiary things. He's not backing down from the sort of personality we expect him to be. And this, of course, all taking place during a very high-profile court case. If anybody thought Donald Trump was going to water down his act, they're going to be sorely disappointed.
No, absolutely. And he had a lot to say going into court today. And he mentioned those new polling numbers from a New York Times poll today. Pretty interesting stuff. He has a big lead in the state of Georgia, that could be quite crucial. It's a state that has quite a number of electoral votes. It'll count, be important when when the election comes in November. But big thing today, and that's Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, a guy who said he would take a bullet for Trump, on the stand today. He's been very tacit, very professional sounding, as far as we can tell, in the prosecution's questions so far. Donald Trump, we understand, was looking intently. Jurors were very interested. So this will be the new bit. I think people will be watching this bit of the New York trial very closely.
And it's fascinating, Laurie, to get back to a couple of those polls, that Joe Biden's polling has fallen off a cliff amongst younger voters because they think he's got it wrong on Israel and Palestine. Donald Trump has just said, well, I'll deport the lot of you. And interestingly, the younger voters are swinging towards Donald Trump. I'm sure nobody saw that coming in Team Democrat.
Honestly, that's a really big point to make, and I think it's something we'll discuss as the election comes closer. But young voters came out in greater proportions for Biden in 2020 than they did in either of the elections that featured Barack Obama, right? He was meant to be the presidential candidate that the millennials loved, but they pulled for Biden in 2020. As you say, that's really, really falling quite dramatically. Trump is making inroads with younger voters, with Hispanic voters, and that's where he's seeing some really big jumps in his poll numbers over 4 years ago, and also African-American voters.
Astonishing. It's going to be the greatest show on earth. It always is. November the 5th is when they go to the polls. Bonfire night. How
Mark your calendar.
Certainly going to be fireworks. Laurie Laird, thank you so much for joining us live on the show. Delight to have you on. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll discuss the report that says Just Stop Oil and Palestine action should be prescribed in a similar way to terror organisations. But first, it's your headlines, and it's Tamsin Roberts.
Martin, thanks very much. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom at 5:32. Rishi Sunak has warned that giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would leave the country less safe. Setting out his pre-election pitch to voters, the Prime Minister said protecting people during what he called the dangerous but transformational times ahead is something only the Conservatives can do. In the US, Donald Trump's former fixer Michael Cohen has taken to the witness stand at his criminal trial. He told jurors in the last hour that he secretly colluded with Mr. Trump and a tabloid publisher to suppress negative stories that could damage Trump's 2016 campaign. Mr. Cohen used to be one of the former president's most trusted colleagues, but he's now the prosecution's star witness as the so-called hush money trial enters its 5th week. A judge has ruled that parts of the government's Rwanda plan should not be applied in Northern Ireland. The High Court in Belfast determined that aspects of the Illegal Migration Act are incompatible with human rights laws and would breach the Good Friday Agreement. The UK government will have the chance to appeal before another hearing later this month. A man is facing life in prison for murdering a woman during a series of violent attacks in South London. 34-year-old Mohamed Noor was armed with a makeshift blade when he attacked Yohanita Kosiwa-Dogbe in broad daylight last May. He admitted her murder and having a blade made from scissors, but denied carrying out similar attacks in the days before her death. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2563 and €1.1635. The price of gold is £1,860 and 56 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed at 8,414 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now, in a few minutes' time, I'll be joined in the studio by a Just Stop Oil activist after reports claim the group should be prescribed, just like other terrorist organisations. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us at GB News, and here's Beth Turner with the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest. There are long queues heading south down the M1 through Bedfordshire this evening from junction 11 to 10 towards the Luton Airport Spur. That's as you head into the roadworks. Making matters worse is a lorry broke down in the outside lane earlier on, although all restrictions have been lifted. And in Surrey, the A22, the Caterham bypass remains closed southbound from the Wopses Lodge roundabout down to the M25. That was following a collision and large spillage last night. There are long queues back onto the M25 and onto the Godstone Road and Croydon. And in Dorset, the A35 remains shut in Winterbourne, Abbas and Long Breedy. That's following an accident. And London Overground trains remain suspended between Sydenham and West Croydon, all down to problems with the signals at Penge West. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Today is a good day for the King, a good day for Britain. I'm sure you'll be hoping that those Not My King morons decide to give it a rest for a little while, because he is still dealing with an illness, isn't he?
He's still dealing with an illness, and he appears to be dealing extremely well. I think he comes from the fact that he's extremely strong and fit. I think I understand that will help his treatment enormously. And I think, as your professor was saying, it's the fatigue that can be a brutal thing when you're trying to lead a normal life with cancer. But I think that it's going to really help him psychologically to get out there, and people are going to be giving him enormous support. I mean, I know, as you say, there's an anti-monarchy brigade, but there's been an anti-monarchy brigade since there's been a monarchy. So that is not such a big deal. It has always been there. I feel that Charles is going to get a lot of support from the sort of joyousness of people seeing him and, you know, wishing him well. And I think that that's going to be immensely important to him. It's a very busy time, but I think a boost for William and Kate. William's out and about. We don't know about Kate, but I feel that the King will definitely. It's a very busy time coming up with the anniversary of D-Day in Normandy, which I know he will be desperate to be a part of. Then there's the big royal season, the Trooping the Colour, the Garter ceremony, Royal Ascot. And then he is hosting the Emperor and Empress of Japan at the end of June. So it's a absolutely packed month for someone that is presumably going to get very tired.
Yes, indeed. I mean, if he gets through all of that, I think that will be absolutely massive, won't it?
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, there's still plenty of time to win our biggest cash prize of the year so far. Whopping £20,000 tax-free. Now, imagine having all of that cash in your bank account this summer. Well, imagine no more, because here's how you could win the lot.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, a government commission report has claimed that Just Stop Oil and Palestine action should be prescribed in a similar way to terror organisations. The report, led by former Labour MP John Woodcock, recommends creating extreme protest restriction orders, which could see groups like the ones mentioned completely banned. And it comes with a total of 40 recommendations and will be sent to Downing Street in the next few days. Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is Just Stop Oil spokesperson Sean Irish. Sean, welcome to the studio. The report is very blunt in its wording. It says militant groups like Just Stop Oil and Palestine Action use criminal tactics to create mayhem and hold the public and workers to ransom without fear of consequences. He wants you treated like terrorists. He's got a point, hasn't he?
That's interesting, isn't it, Martin? I mean, let's take a step back for a second. Let's see what's happened in the last year. How many journalists have we seen arrested in the UK this year? You know, we've seen multiple journalists arrested for trying to advertise these protests. We have seen the UK has twice been defeated in the courts that their climate policies are illegal. And now they're trying to do this. They know it's not going to stop us. They brought out the public order bill. That didn't stop us. They brought out more restrictions. They were putting people in prison, and it hasn't stopped us because the issues are more important than what they can threaten us with. So now what they're trying to do is they're trying to squash the media. If they put us into this group, you will not be allowed to have us on the telly. This is a direct attack on GB News and other publicists who will no longer be able to show the news without fear of being targeted by the government.
Well, they're not trying to ban us. They're not trying to call us a terror group. They're trying to call you lot a terror group, and they're doing that because many people have full right to say smashing the glass on the Magna Carta, we can see on the screen, is utterly imbecilic. That is criminal damage to one of the most sacrosanct documents in the history of the democratic world. Why do you think that's acceptable?
So I would like to point out that when Sue Parfitt and the other lady smashed it, they were setting it free. The government have completely tarnished it. The government have completely tarnished the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is the basis for all of UK law. And the two basic things that still remain from the Magna Carta is that we should all be treated equally and that we all have the right to a jury of our peers. That has been proven false in the UK. We have seen in the UK people have been sent to prison on remand without trial. My partner's been sent to prison twice without trial. Once they were found not guilty, so they were in prison for up to 5 months, found not guilty of the crime they were committed. And second time, they were put in prison, and then 3 weeks later, it was decided it was actually illegal to put them there in the first place.
So, Sean, this report recommends you should be compared with militant groups like Palestine Action. You're wearing a Palestine scarf. They've got a point, haven't they?
This is a keffiyeh. And no, they haven't got a point.
Why are you wearing it?
So this is a symbol of Palestinian liberation, and it's a good point. We're seeing what's happening at the moment now. The media, is trying to be squashed in Israel. They've got rid of Al Jazeera. What we are saying is the UK is now trying to do the same, and it's terrifying. The UK government is not going to stop people from wanting action on the climate crisis. We've got a very simple demand. The UK government needs to put in a plan to end oil use, oil, coal and gas by 2030.
They won't do that because it will bankrupt the country. We can't run on fans and solar panels. The wind stops.
We could run on the hot air out of GB News alone, right?
Well,
we need action. The government already knows it's cheaper to go to green energy. That's been proven years ago. The main issue is that the fossil fuel industry sends billions of pounds into Tory pockets every year, and that is the main reason they're not doing it. We know it's cheaper, we know it supplies more jobs, and we know it can save the economy and save the future.
Do you think people might listen to you a bit more if you didn't go around smashing windows on banks, smashing the Magna Carta and stopping them getting from work? Like, when are you going to read the room and realise that people just aren't behind you anymore?
When are you going to read the room? I mean, the real thing is that journalists will not have us on. You do not discuss the crisis unless we are on. When are you really going to talk? Why do you have me on? Why do you not have the CEO of Shell asking about the destruction that his company is causing all over the world? When we smash the Magna Carta, you bring us in. When are you going to start being a real journalist, ask the real questions,
I'm asking you the simple question. When do you think the public are going to side with vandals? You're vandals. You're vandalising sacred artefacts to the point where now lawmakers want you to be treated as a prescribed terrorist unit.
That's like, can I just check, are you under the illusion that it was legal for us to do that?
Well, why then in jail then? Why do you do it if you know it's illegal?
Because we have a judicial system in the UK that the Tories are currently trying to overdo it. But at the moment, you go to trial. If you're found guilty by a jury of your peers, you can be sent to prison. What the Tories are now trying to do is they're trying to vacate that through private injunctions where companies like Shell can spend millions of pounds and suddenly you lose the right to the jury of your peers because Shell paid for a private law that never goes through the House of Commons, never goes through the House of Lords, and is never asked the public. The people want action, and silencing protest, silencing journalists will not stop that.
OK, Sean, you've got a bunch of badges on there. Just Stop Oil, Palestine will be free. The one I can't read out, it's got an expletive, the Tories. Don't read it out, please, you'll get us in trouble. You obviously protest a lot, 7 days a week. Do you have a day job, or is protesting your job?
Yes, of course I have a job. I do not have the luxury of the Tory party, of being able to have the taxpayers' money fund my lovely lifestyle. I have to work, as do most people in this country, and the Tories are ruining that economy. People want action on the cost of living crisis, they want action on the climate crisis, and the Tories and Labour are not promising to deliver that. That is terrifying. No one in this country, no government is currently offering a solution, and it's clear the scientists are pulling their hair out. Over 300 scientists have signed a letter saying that we need to be in civil resistance because the government have been found to be breaching their own policies.
What does civil resistance look like? Does it involve just going around willy-nilly smashing things up, stopping people getting to work, or should you be banged up for that? People are sick of it.
So, look at civil resistance in the past. I don't think I should have to block a road. I don't think we should have to smash the Magna Carta. I think we should have a government that represents people. I think we should have journalists who ask the real questions and bring on scientists. Bring on the scientists. Don't bring on... I'm not a scientist. Ask the IPC scientists to come in and justify why they're saying what they're saying. Ask Shell to come in and justify why the cost of living crisis bills are so high while the climate crisis is getting worse. Why have they made so much profit while Africa burns, while our crops fail? And we need action by 2030, and groups will not stop. Palestine Action will not stop if you make them illegal. Just Stop Oil will not stop if you make them illegal. GBNews will not stop if you make them illegal.
You might be in jail, so it might be stopping that way. Look, thanks for your time.
There's not enough jails in the country.
Well, there we go. You've heard it there. We might have to build some more. Sean Irish from Just Stop Oil, thanks for joining us. I appreciate your candour, I really do. Thank you. Now, one of England's greatest cricketers, James Anderson, will retire this summer and about to be joined by the absolutely legendary, the godlike David Gower to look back at Anderson's magnificent career. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, time for the latest forecast with the Met Office for GB News. Warm and bright once again in the east today, but cloudier and cooler elsewhere with outbreaks of rain moving steadily in from the west to the east because of this area of low pressure, which has displaced the high that brought us so much fine weather over the last week or so. That fine weather persists just about into the evening for eastern England, northeast Scotland. It's cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain that have been persisting in the west through the day. They will move their way eastwards as the night progresses. The rain becomes a bit more fragmented, so it's on and off rain across western Scotland, northern and central England. Some clear spells towards the west and a chilly feel here first thing, single figures, but for many others it's 12 to 15 Celsius as we begin the day on Tuesday, and frequent showers appearing into the southwest and South Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Some of these could be quite heavy and slow moving. They will be accompanied by thunder in the far southwest, but some brightness in between, so feeling a bit more pleasant perhaps compared with Monday's weather. In the east, though, a real change of weather compared with the last few days. Cloudy, outbreaks of rain and a lot of low cloud. We've still got that low cloud on Wednesday morning across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland. Brighter skies towards the west, but again, a day of sunny spells and showers. And really, sunny spells and showers, the theme on Thursday and Friday as well.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to 5:50. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now let's end the show by paying tribute to one of England's greatest ever sportsmen. Jimmy Anderson has announced he will retire this summer, and Anderson, of course, has taken 700 wickets in Test cricket to put him third on the all-time list. I'm joined now by another England legend, the former captain, the godlike, David Gower. David, an absolute delight to have you on the show. Listen, you've been on the receiving end of some of the world's best bowlers of all time. Tell us, what did Jimmy Anderson have that made him so special?
Yeah, sorry. Before I get to that, can I say godlike is overstating it. I'm a very flawed human being. But if anyone is the Messiah here, it is Jimmy. 20 years at the top of the game. If I'd ever had to face him, I'd have to probably endorse the words of Sir Alistair Cook, who said that Jimmy was capable of making him, and he is one of our finest ever as well in terms of run getting, was capable of making him look very foolish indeed. The skills that Jimmy has honed over the last 20 years are incredible. The fitness levels are incredible. I mean, if someone like me, whose godlike powers faded at the age of about 35, for Jimmy still to be bowling at a fair old lick at the age of 41 is literally incredible.
22 years in an England shirt. And there is some good news to this. Of course, he will bow out in July's final test against the West Indies in July on the 10th to the 14th. But he could come back as a bowling coach potentially for England, David.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom that he's accumulated over those 20 plus years. To leave at the end of a Lord's Test match, I guess that's quite special. I suppose there would have been a temptation to try and make it Old Trafford, his home ground, but Lord's is the first test of the summer. It allows the selectors to then move on to the next phase, which is obviously what they want to do. Brendan McCullum has made his mind up, no doubt with the collusion of Ben Stokes, that this is the time to look ahead and make new plans. So they give Jimmy his farewell, and there'll be the usual tears, guard of honour, obviously hopes that he will finish on a very, very high note, if at all possible, and then they move on. So that gives us the rest of the summer for them to use his knowledge. Yes, if they're going to employ him straight away, that'll be interesting. They might sort of give him a bit of a break before they sort of induct him into the coaching staff. But there's so much wisdom there, so much skill there. And just having him sitting in the rooms alongside the next generation itself would be inspirational, I'm sure.
So, David, 11,000 runs in your career, 25 centuries over the years. A lot of the bowlers out there have done their very best to try and, take you out. Who is the best bowler that you ever faced?
I think those figures seem to get more and more every time. My man, I mean, I've tried to do this before, tried to work this out before. I think the best I ever faced was a fellow called Malcolm Marshall. Sadly, the late Malcolm Marshall, who was one of that crop of West Indies fast bowlers in the 80s, who was skillful, he was quick. He was one of the reasons I moved to Hampshire for the last 4 years of my county career, just to be on the same side as him for once and not have to face him ever again, except maybe in a net, and that you can avoid. And obviously there's quite a field of very, very fine bowlers from that era, but he was my top pick for number one.
OK, superb. We've simply run out of time. We'll have to up stumps. David Gower, thank you so much for joining us and paying credit to Jimmy Anderson, bowing out after 21 magnificent 22 years in an England shirt. It was a pleasure to have on the show. David Gower, you take care. Now, that's all from me for now. Jubes & Co, of course, is up next. And don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel, followed, of course, by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then Tom and Emily on Good Afternoon Britain from midday, and then my mush is back at 3 p.m. Been a pleasure having your company today. I'm Morton Daubney, and this is GB News. But before all of this, it's time for your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon. Take care.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, time for the latest forecast with the Met Office for GB News. Warm and bright once again in the east today, but cloudier and cooler elsewhere with outbreaks of rain moving steadily in from the west to the east because of this area of low pressure which has displaced the high that brought us so much fine weather over the last week or so. That fine weather persists just about into the evening for eastern England, northeast Scotland. It's cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain that have been persisting in the west through the day. They will move their way eastwards as the night progresses. The rain becomes a bit more fragmented, so it's on and off rain across western Scotland, northern and central England. Some clear spells towards the west and a chilly feel here first thing, single figures, but for many others it's 12 to 15 Celsius as we begin the day on Tuesday, and frequent showers appearing into the southwest and South Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Some of these could be quite heavy and slow moving. They will be accompanied by thunder in the far southwest, but some brightness in between, so feeling a bit more pleasant perhaps compared with Monday's weather. In the east, though, a real change of weather compared with the last few days. Cloudy, outbreaks of rain and a lot of low cloud. We've still got that low cloud on Wednesday morning across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland. Brighter skies towards the west, but again, a day of sunny spells and showers. And really, sunny spells and showers, the theme on Thursday and Friday as well.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest. There are long queues heading north up the M6 through Staffordshire from junctions 16 to 17 heading away from Stoke-on-Trent towards the Crewe exit where the left lane remains shut for emergency repairs. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the inside lane's blocked northbound